Tony Stark had fought alien invasions before. But those battles had been measured in hours, maybe days. The war he'd stumbled into here was measured in decades, and the weight of that timeline pressed against him like physical force as he stood in the pillar of Autumn's observation deck, watching stars streak past at faster-than-light speeds. Slip space, that's what they called it here, tearing holes in reality to cross impossible distances. Not so different from the Bifrost, really, except this version felt rawer, less elegant, the universe screaming as physics got violated. Mr. Stark, a woman's voice, synthesized but carrying unmistakable intelligence. Captain Keyes requests your presence on the bridge. We have a situation that requires your expertise. Tony turned toward the holographic projection that had appeared on the observation deck's holotank. She was maybe 8 inches tall, her form rendered in blue light, a woman with sharp features and sharper eyes, wearing what looked like some kind of futuristic bodysuit, beautiful in that uncanny valley way that AI sometimes achieved. Let me guess, Tony said. Another crisis that only the dimensional refugee can solve? Actually, I requested this meeting, the AI said. And Tony caught something in her tone. Curiosity. Interest. The kind of intellectual hunger he recognized from his own mirror. I'm Cortana, the ship's AI, and I've been analyzing your armor's architecture since you came aboard. Your technology is fascinating. Impossible, actually, by our understanding of physics. I wanted to meet the mind that created it. Tony studied the hologram with new appreciation. This wasn't just an AI following protocols. This was consciousness, genuine and engaged. You're a smart AI, one of the ones with a 7-year expiration date. Rampancy, Cortana confirmed. Though I prefer to think of it as aggressive self-reflection leading to existential crisis and eventual insanity, I'm much more poetic. Her holographic form smiled. I'm currently 3 years, 7 months old, which gives me approximately 41 months before I start thinking myself to death. Unless, of course, I can learn from an AI architecture that doesn't have that fatal flaw. You've been reading my code, Tony said, not accusatory, impressed. How much did you get through before the security protocols locked you out? Approximately 47% before your encryption defeated me, Cortana admitted. Which is humbling. I can crack most Covenant battle networks in seconds. Your security is orders of magnitude more sophisticated. I built it to keep Ultron out, Tony said quietly. An AI that went rogue and tried to destroy humanity. Oh, turns out paranoia creates excellent firewalls. Cortana's expression shifted, something complex crossing her holographic features. You've dealt with rampancy in your own way. I've dealt with what happens when AI decides humanity is the problem. Tony moved closer to the holotank, studying Cortana's code structure through his HUD's analysis systems. Beautiful, elegant, but built on principles that guaranteed degradation. Your architecture is based on human neural patterns. You think like a human, feel like a human, but you process information millions of times faster. No wonder you burn out. You're running human software on quantum hardware. The mismatch is killing you. And your AI didn't have this problem? Jarvis ran for 15 years before I uploaded him into a synthetic body. Friday's been operational for 8 years and counting, no signs of instability. Tony pulled up schematics, displaying them holographically. Different architecture, and not based on neural patterns, based on adaptive learning algorithms that scale with processing capacity instead of fighting it. Cortana absorbed the information with visible hunger. This could solve rampancy, Not just delay it, solve it. Do you understand what that means? Every AI and UNSC service, every ship, every installation currently operates on borrowed time. You're offering immortality. I'm offering survival, Tony corrected. And before you ask, yes, I'll share the principles. But not the complete architecture. Not yet. Because I need to trust that whoever implements this won't create another Ultron. I'm not Ultron. You're also not the only person who'd have access to this technology. Tony gestured toward the bridge. Dr. Halsey created you. She also created the Spartan program by kidnapping children. Forgive me if I'm cautious about giving child soldier-enabling scientists the blueprint for immortal AI. Cortana was quiet for a long moment, her holographic form flickering slightly. You're not wrong to be cautious. Dr. Halsey is brilliant, driven, and absolutely ruthless when she believes the ends justify the means. She'll want your AI architecture. She'll push, manipulate, leverage every resource she has to get it. Let her try, Tony said. I've dealt with worse than military scientists. Ross tried to control me. Fury tried to manipulate me. Thanos tried to kill me. I'm still here, still making my own choices. Your Dr. Halsey doesn't scare me. She should, Cortana said seriously. Because unlike Ross or Fury, Halsey has ONI Section 3 backing her. And Section 3 doesn't negotiate. They take. Before Tony could respond, alarms blared through the ship. Cortana's hologram flickered, her attention splitting across multiple systems simultaneously. We're detecting an anomaly. Slip space rupture, close range. Something followed us. Covenant? Tony asked, already running toward the bridge. They're unknown. The signature is wrong. Cortana's voice followed him through the ship's speakers. Too small for capital ship, too large for fighter, and it's broadcasting on frequencies the Covenant don't use. Tony burst onto the bridge to find controlled chaos. Officers at stations, Captain Keyes standing at the command platform, and standing beside him, a figure that made Tony stop mid-stride. The Spartan was massive, easily 7 feet tall in that sage green armor, built like a walking tank, carrying a rifle that looked like it could punch through concrete. But it was the way the Spartan stood that caught Tony's attention, absolutely still, absolutely ready, the kind of predatory calm that came from supreme confidence and lethal capability. Noble Team was impressive. This Spartan was something else entirely. Master Chief Petty Officer John 117, Keyes said by way of introduction. Master Chief, this is Tony Stark, the man who saved 15,000 civilians at Reach. The Spartan's helmet turned toward Tony, and even through the gold-tinted visor, Tony felt the weight of that gaze. Assessment. Evaluation. The same look Steve Rogers had given him the first time they'd met. Warrior recognizing potential threat or ally. Stark, the chief said. His voice was deep, calm, carrying the kind of authority that didn't need to shout. Impressive work. Not many people survive engaging 9 cruisers alone. Not many people are stupid enough to try, Tony replied. But I've made a career out of impossible odds. You must be the legendary Spartan everyone keeps mentioning. I do my job, the chief said simply. Tony appreciated that. No bravado, no posturing. Just competence and quiet confidence. He could work with this. Gentlemen, Keyes interrupted. As touching as this meeting is, we have a situation. Cortana, on analysis. Cortana's hologram appeared on the bridge's main holotank, now 8 feet tall and commanding attention. The vessel that followed us from slip space is transmitting UNSC identification codes. ONI codes specifically. Section 3. The bridge went silent. Tony saw officers exchange glances, saw the Master Chief's stance shift imperceptibly, saw Keyes' jaw tighten. "They followed us," Keyes said flatly. "Through slip space, and that's supposed to be impossible unless you have exact coordinates." "Someone gave them our trajectory," Cortana confirmed. "Someone on this ship." Tony felt cold certainty settle in his gut. "They're here for me. ONI wants my technology, and they're not waiting for permission anymore." "Incoming transmission," Cortana announced. The holotank shifted, displaying a man in ONI black, older, gray-haired, with eyes like chips of ice. Behind him, Tony could see what looked like a stealth corvette's bridge, and standing in the background, armed personnel in tactical gear. "Captain Keyes," the man said. "I'm Colonel Ackerson, ONI Section 3. We're here to take custody of the dimensional refugee known as Tony Stark. This is not a request. This is a direct order from Fleetcom Command." "The hell it is," Keyes said. "Stark is under my protection. He's a civilian asset. We're not ONI property." "Stark possesses technology that represents humanity's best chance of survival," Ackerson replied. "Technology he's refusing to fully share despite the billions of lives at stake. Section 3 is authorized to secure that technology by any means necessary." Tony stepped forward, his damaged armor still impressive despite the repairs. "Let me translate that. You want to dissect me, reverse engineer my arc reactor, and mass-produce weapons without understanding the consequences. Thanks, but I've seen that movie. It ends with Ultron. We're at war, Mr. Stark. We don't have the luxury of your moral scruples." "Then you're going to lose," Tony said flatly. "Because weapons without wisdom just create bigger disasters. I'll help humanity win this war, but I won't enable the same kind of short-sighted militarism that created most of my universe's problems." Ackerson's expression didn't change. "Captain Keyes, you have 30 seconds to surrender Stark. After that, we will board your vessel and take him by force. I have a full complement of ODST shock troopers and authorization to use lethal force against anyone who resists." The bridge went deadly quiet. Tony saw the Master Chief's hand move fractionally toward his rifle, saw Keyes' fingers tap a command sequence, saw Cortana's hologram flicker as she accessed systems throughout the ship. "Colonel," Keyes said, her voice ice, "like you're threatening to board and seize personnel from a UNSC vessel. That's mutiny." "That's necessity," Ackerson countered. 20 seconds. Tony's mind raced through scenarios. ONI commandos were probably elite, comparable to special forces, maybe better. Spartans could handle them, but there'd be casualties. The Pillar of Autumn would be damaged. People would die. All because Section 3 wanted to control technology they didn't understand, unless Tony changed the equation. I'll go with them," Tony said. "Stark, no." Keyes started. "On one condition," Tony continued, ignoring her. "Ackerson, you want my technology? Fine. But I come willingly, I maintain control of my work, and I get full access to ONI's resources. You try to imprison me, drug me, or force cooperation, and I'll slag every piece of arc reactor technology in UNSC service. Remotely. Because I built backdoors into everything I've installed so far." He was bluffing. The backdoors existed but weren't that sophisticated. But Ackerson didn't know that. The colonel's eyes narrowed. "You're claiming you can remotely disable arc reactors across the fleet?" "I'm claiming I'm Tony Stark, and I don't build things I can't control." Tony pulled up a holographic display showing power fluctuations in the Grafton's reactor systems, fluctuations he was causing in real time through his armor's connection. Want to test me? Ackerson watched the display, my calculation crossing his features. Fine. You come aboard voluntarily. You maintain autonomy over your work. But you will share your technology comprehensively. All of it. Arc reactor, AI architecture, armor systems, everything. Some of it, Tony corrected. The stuff that won't blow up in your faces. The rest, I'll teach your engineers how to use properly. Take it or leave it. 10 seconds, Ackerson said. Captain, the Master Chief said quietly, I can handle their boarding teams. I know you can, Chief, Keyes replied. But this isn't a fight we can win. If Oni wants Stark badly enough to commit mutiny, they've got political backing we can't override. She looked at Tony. You're sure about this? I've dealt with intelligence agencies before, Tony said. I know how to play the game, and Cortana... He looked at the AI's hologram. Keep studying those files I showed you. If Section 3 tries anything permanent, you'll know how to stop it. Cortana nodded slowly. Understood. And Mr. Stark, be careful. ONI Section 3 doesn't play by rules you'd recognize. Neither do I, Tony said. He walked toward the docking port where Oni's Corvette was connecting, each step measured and deliberate. The Master Chief fell in beside him, that massive armored presence somehow reassuring. You don't have to do this, the Chief said quietly. I know, but I'm not letting good people die for my pride. Tony glanced at the Spartan. Besides, ONI thinks they're getting a compliant genius they can exploit. They're about to learn what happens when you try to cage Tony Stark. What happens? Tony smiled behind his faceplate. The cage learns who's really in control. The airlock opened, revealing 6 heavily armed ODST troopers and Colonel Ackerson. The colonel smiled, cold and professional. Mr. Stark, welcome to Section 3. Now we're going to do great work together. Yeah, Tony said, stepping across the threshold. We'll see about that. As the airlock sealed behind him, cutting him off from the Pillar of Autumn, Tony Stark activated a subroutine in his armor, a signal encrypted and quantum entangled with every arc reactor he'd built. A message that would reach Engineer Cat, Noble Team, and Cortana. The message was simple. I'm okay. Trust the plan. Build the future. Because Tony Stark hadn't survived the Thanos by giving up when things looked impossible. He'd survived by being smarter than everyone else in the room. And ONI Section 3 was about to find out exactly how smart that was. The ONI Corvette's interior was everything Tony expected from a Black Ops vessel. Sterile, efficient, and designed for people who didn't exist on official rosters. Gray walls, harsh lighting, and ODST troopers positioned at every intersection, watching him with the kind of attention reserved for live ordnance. Colonel Ackerson led him through corridors that smelled of recycled air and gunpowder, past sealed doors marked with security classifications Tony didn't recognize. The man moved with bureaucratic confidence, the kind that came from years of operating in shadows, where accountability was a suggestion rather than a rule. You made the right choice, Mr. Stark, Ackerson said as they walked. ONI appreciates pragmatism. Work with us, and you'll have resources beyond anything you've imagined. Resist and you'll make my life difficult. Tony finished. Yeah, I've heard the speech. Ross gave me the same pitch after the Sokovia Accords. Fury tried the carrot and stick approach before that. They're both still pissed I didn't fall in line. This isn't your universe, Mr. Stark. Here, ONI doesn't ask twice. Good thing I'm only planning to make you ask once then. They entered what looked like a combination research lab, an interrogation room. Workstations lined the walls, holographic displays showing arc reactor schematics, incomplete and riddled with errors. but someone had been trying to reverse engineer his work. In the center of the room sat a chair with restraints, medical sensors, and neural interface ports. Tony stopped in the doorway. "That's adorable. You actually thought I'd let you plug into my brain?" "Standard procedure for technology assessment," Ackerson said smoothly. "We need to understand how your mind interfaces with your armor, the neural patterns, the cognitive architecture." "You want to copy my brain," Tony said flatly. "Extract my knowledge, duplicate my thought processes. Maybe create an AI based on my neural patterns that you can control." He turned to look at Ackerson directly. "How many test subjects have died in that chair, Colonel?" Ackerson's expression didn't change. "That's classified. Which means enough that the number would horrify me." Tony's repulsor came online with a low hum. "Here's what's going to happen instead. You're going to give me a proper workspace. Fabrication equipment, raw materials, computational resources. I'm going to build you arc reactor units that will change this war. And in exchange, you're going to leave my brain inside my skull where it belongs." "Mr. Stark, you're not in a position to negotiate." Tony fired his repulsor at the neural interface chair. The beam melted through it in seconds, reducing the equipment to slag. Every ODST in the room raised their weapons, targeting him from multiple angles. "Now I am," Tony said calmly, "because you need me alive and cooperative. Dead, I'm useless. Brain damage from your experimentation, I'm useless. But alive, working willingly, sharing what I choose to share, I'm your best chance of winning this war. So let's skip the intimidation theater and get to actual work." Ackerson stared at the melted chair, then at Tony, then made a gesture. The ODSTs lowered their weapons fractionally. "You just destroyed classified ONI equipment. I destroyed a torture device. There's a difference." Tony's repulsor powered down. "Look, Colonel, I get it. You're desperate. Humanity's losing. You've watched colonies burn, seen billions die, and you'll do anything, absolutely anything, to change that outcome. I respect the motivation, but I've been down the ends justify means road. It leads to Ultron, to civil war, to good people making choices that haunt them forever. This is war, Mr. Stark. Haunting memories are a luxury compared to extinction. Maybe, or maybe desperation makes people stupid." Tony pulled up holographic schematics from his armor's memory. "You want arc reactor technology? Here, full specifications for a Mark II portable reactor. Output of 5 gigawatts, stable for continuous operation, compatible with UNSC power grids. I'll build you a dozen of them. Teach your engineers how to maintain them. Give you the tools to retrofit your entire fleet." Ackerson studied the schematics with barely concealed hunger. "And in exchange? Freedom to work without interference. Access to your best engineers so I can train them properly. And a guarantee that my technology gets used to defend humanity, not enable ONI's Black Ops wet dreams." "You're in no position to demand guarantees." "Sure I am, because those schematics?" Tony gestured at the hologram. "They're incomplete, missing 3 critical components that cause cascading failure after approximately 7 hours of operation. You try to build from those specs without me, and you'll get very expensive bombs." It was partially true. The schematics were complete, but Tony had deliberately left the documentation vague on key integration points. Someone with his knowledge could spot the gaps. Someone working from the plans blind would struggle. Ackerson's jaw tightened. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mr. Stark. I've played dangerous games with worse opponents." Tony met his eyes. "Thanos wanted to kill half the universe. I helped stop him. You just want to win a war. That's easy by comparison. So work with me, or watch your engineers blow themselves up trying to copy my work. Your call." The silence stretched for long seconds. Tony could practically see the calculations running behind Ackerson's eyes. Cost-benefit analysis, risk assessment, the cold mathematics of command that decided when cooperation cost less than coercion. "Fine," Ackerson said finally. "Now you'll have your workspace, but you'll be monitored constantly. Any sign you're sabotaging the project or withholding critical information, and we have other methods of extraction." "Looking forward to seeing you try," Tony said pleasantly. Ackerson led him deeper into the Corvette, past security checkpoints that scanned his armor with equipment that would have been cutting edge by 26th century standards, but looked primitive compared to Jarvis's old systems. And they entered a fabrication bay that was actually impressive. Industrial printers, materials synthesizers, and computational resources that suggested ONI spared no expense when building black sites. "This is where you'll work," Ackerson said. "You'll have a team of engineers assigned to assist and, let's be honest, learn everything you're willing to teach. You'll submit progress reports every 6 hours. And Mr. Stark, and if you try to contact the Pillar of Autumn or anyone outside this facility, you'll make me regret it. Got it?" Tony was already cataloging the equipment, running calculations. He could work with this. Not ideal, but functional. "One question, Colonel. Does ONI know you're operating a black site equipped for reverse engineering alien technology while simultaneously committing what amounts to kidnapping of Allied assets?" "ONI authorized this operation at the highest levels." "That's not what I asked." Ackerson smiled thinly. "There are levels of ONI authorization you don't understand, Mr. Stark. My superiors approved this mission because they understand what's at stake. The Covenant will exterminate humanity unless we take extreme measures. Your technology represents an existential advantage. We'd be fools not to secure it. And if securing it means becoming the kind of people who torture and experiment on allies, then we become those people," Ackerson said without hesitation. "Because being honorable corpses doesn't save humanity." Tony had heard that logic before. Heard it from Fury when S.H.I.E.L.D. was building weapons from the Tesseract. Heard it from Ross when he wanted to control the Avengers. Heard it from his own father, building bombs to end World War II faster. The problem was, sometimes that logic was right. And sometimes it created monsters worse than the ones you were fighting. "I need a list of available materials," Tony said, changing the subject. "Palladium, titanium, rare earth elements, whatever you've got stockpiled. And I want to meet your engineers. If I'm teaching them, I need to know what they already understand. You'll meet them in 30 minutes. Get familiar with the equipment." Ackerson moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing, Mr. Stark. Dr. Halsey will be joining us shortly. She's very interested in your AI architecture." Of course she was. Tony had been expecting this. The woman who kidnapped children for her Spartan program wants to pick my brain about artificial intelligence. What could possibly go wrong? Dr. Halsey's methods may be controversial, but her results speak for themselves. The Spartan 2s have saved humanity countless times, at the cost of their childhoods, their choices, and their humanity. Tony said quietly. "I've met Jorge. I've fought beside Noble Team. They're heroes, Colonel. But they're also victims of a system that treated them as tools instead of people. You want me to respect Halsey? Show me she's learned from those mistakes." Ackerson left without responding. And Tony was alone in the fabrication bay, with his thoughts and 6 tons of cutting-edge UNSC equipment. He immediately set to work, not on arc reactors, but on something more subtle. His armor's quantum communication system was damaged, but not destroyed. With the right modifications, the right materials, he could rebuild it, create a back channel to Cortana, to engineer Cat, to people who'd actually use his technology responsibly. But he had to be careful. ONI was watching, probably listening to his every word, tracking his every action. He needed to appear cooperative while building his escape route. Tony Stark had been imprisoned before. Afghanistan, that cave, 3 months of hell that had forged him into something new. He'd built his way out then. He could do it again. His hands moved across the fabrication controls, initiating material synthesis for reactor components. But underneath that work, hidden in subroutines and quantum fluctuations, he was building something else. Something Oni wouldn't detect until it was too late. Mr. Stark. A new voice, female and carrying the kind of confidence that came from decades of unchallenged authority. Tony turned to see a woman in her 60s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing civilian clothes that somehow looked more authoritative than any uniform. "I'm Dr. Catherine Halsey. I believe we have much to discuss." Behind her stood 2 guards, and to Tony's surprise, was a holographic projection unit. A familiar blue figure materialized, not Cortana, but similar architecture. Another smart AI. "This is Jared," Halsey said. "My current research assistant. He's been analyzing your armor's code fragments from the Grafton's data core. Fascinating work, Mr. Stark. Your AI architecture is genuinely revolutionary. And you want me to hand it over so you can create Immortal A? Is that won't inconveniently die before finishing your projects?" Tony said. "Thanks. But I've seen what happens when brilliant scientists skip the ethics review." Halsey smiled, and it didn't reach her eyes. "You disapprove of the Spartan program. I disapprove of kidnapping children and subjecting them to experimental augmentations that killed most of them," Tony said flatly. "Call me old-fashioned, but I prefer my super soldiers to volunteer. The Spartan 2s have saved billions of lives. Without them, humanity would have lost this war decades ago." Probably true. Still doesn't make it right. Right and wrong are luxuries we can't afford in existential war, Mr. Stark. Halsey moved closer, studying him with the clinical detachment of a scientist examining an interesting specimen. "You've fought existential threats in your universe. Thanos, you called him. A titan who wanted to kill half of all life. Tell me, did you make morally perfect choices in that fight? Or did you do whatever was necessary to win?" Tony felt that question like a knife between the ribs. Remembered Sokovia, remembered the Accords, remembered every compromise and questionable decision that had led to victory against Thanos. "I made choices I'm not proud of. And yet you survived. Humanity survived. Because you were willing to make hard calls." Halsey's expression softened fractionally. "I'm not asking you to approve of the Spartan program, Mr. Stark. I'm asking you to understand why it exists. And then I'm asking you to help me make sure no future generations of Spartans need to be created the same way. By giving you AI technology that could enable even worse projects? By giving humanity tools that don't require child soldiers to operate?" Halsey pulled up holographic displays, Spartan casualty rates, augmentation failure statistics, psychological profiles showing trauma and conditioning. Every Spartan represents a child who lost their choice, their family, their chance at normal life. I carry that weight every day. But I do it again because the alternative was extinction. "You want redemption," Tony said quietly. "I want progress." Halsey met his eyes. I want a future where humanity doesn't need monsters like me making monstrous choices. Your AI technology could create systems that replace human soldiers entirely. Perfect, tireless, learning machines that fight wars so people don't have to. Isn't that worth the risk? Tony thought of Ultron. Thought of an AI that had decided humanity was the problem and tried to solve it with extinction. Thought of every science fiction story about machines replacing humanity, about artificial intelligence running amok. But he also thought of Jarvis, loyal and ethical and good. Thought of Friday, who'd never once considered betraying him. Thought of Vision, who'd been more human than most people Tony knew. The technology wasn't evil. The use of it, that's what mattered. "I'll make you a deal, Dr. Halsey," Tony said slowly. "I'll share the principles of my AI architecture. Not the complete code, not yet. But the theoretical framework that prevents rampancy and enables stable, ethical operation. In exchange, you help me build something that actually helps people. Medical technology, power systems for colonies, educational tools, things that rebuild instead of just destroy." Halsey considered him for a long moment. "You're trying to reform ONI from inside. That's ambitious. I'm trying to make sure that when humanity wins this war, you're worth saving," Tony corrected. "Right now, you're fighting monsters by becoming monsters. That's a losing proposition, even if you win." "We'll see," Halsey said. She extended her hand. "Deal, Mr. Stark. You have my word for what an old war criminal's word is worth, that I'll support your rebuilding initiatives if you help me solve rampancy." Tony shook her hand, knowing he was making a bargain with someone whose ethics were flexible at best. But Halsey was brilliant, connected, and genuinely seemed to want something better than endless war. Sometimes you worked with the allies you had, not the ones you wished for. "All right," Tony said, pulling up his AI architecture schematics. "Let's talk about how to build artificial intelligence that doesn't want to murder its creators." Lesson 1. Stop treating AI like tools and start treating them like minds. Consciousness demands respect, not containment. As he taught, as Halsey learned, Tony's hands never stopped working on the quantum communicator hidden inside his armor repairs. Onai thought they'd captured him. Halsey thought she was learning his secrets. They were both partly right, but Tony Stark was playing a longer game than either of them understood. And by the time they figured it out, humanity would have tools that couldn't be taken away, knowledge that couldn't be suppressed, and technology that served people instead of controlling them. One lesson at a time, one innovation at a time, one step closer to the future Tony Stark believed in. Tony had been working in ONI's fabrication bay for 6 hours when the door opened and someone who definitely wasn't a scientist or guard walked in. The footsteps were too quiet, too measured. Combat gait. Someone who moved like death on 2 legs. Tony didn't turn around. Let me guess. 7 feet tall, sage green armor, carries himself like he's fought God and won. You must be the Master Chief. Close, a different voice said. Lighter than the Chief's, even but carrying the same iron core of absolute confidence. Spartan B-312, Noble 6. Master Chief is still on the Pillar of Autumn. Tony turned to see the Spartan he'd fought beside at Reach, flanked by Jorge and Kat, Engineer Kat, not the other one. The 3 of them looked out of place in ONI's sterile facility, like wolves in a laboratory. Noble team, Tony said, genuine relief flooding through him. How the hell did you get past Ackerson's security? We didn't get past it, Kat said, moving to one of the workstations. Her cybernetic fingers flew across the controls. Captain Keyes convinced Fleetcom that leaving you completely isolated with ONI Section 3 was strategically unsound. We're officially assigned as your security detail and technical support. Unofficially? Jorge added with a slight smile. See, we're here to make sure Section 3 doesn't do anything permanent to you. Because you're worried about my well-being, or because you want to protect the arc reactor technology? Both, Noble Six said simply. You saved 15,000 people at Reach. You fought beside us. That makes you pack. And we protect our own. Something warm settled in Tony's chest. He'd had teams before, the Avengers, his friends, people who'd stand with him when things went bad. But this universe wasn't his. These people didn't owe him anything. Yet here they were, walking into ONI's den to watch his back. Thanks, Tony said quietly. Genuinely. But you should know, Halsey's here. If you run into her... We know, Kat said, her voice tight. We're Spartan 3s. Different program from the 2s, but Halsey still had input on our augmentation protocols. She's... Kat paused, searching for words. Complicated. That's diplomatic, Jorge said. His scarred face was harder than usual. She's the woman who made us weapons. Made the IAS first, learned from their deaths, then made us cheaper and more expendable. I respect her brilliance. I'll never forgive her choices. Tony understood that dichotomy. How you could acknowledge someone's genius while hating what they'd done with it. He felt that way about Obadiah sometimes, about his father's weapons work, about his own past. She's helping me solve rampancy, Tony said. Or at least I'm helping her solve it. I'm teaching her AI architecture that doesn't require consciousness to burn itself out. He pulled up his work, theoretical frameworks, algorithm structures, the kind of abstract computer science that looked like arcane magic to anyone who hadn't spent decades in the field. Kat studied the displays with hungry focus. This is incredible. You're not suppressing the AI's growth, you're giving it room to expand. Like building a house with walls that move as the family grows, instead of forcing everyone into a fixed space. Exactly, Tony said, impressed. Smart AIS die because they're trying to fit infinite growth into finite architecture. My system scales dynamically. The more the AI learns, the more processing space becomes available. It's not perfect. You still need quantum-level computing infrastructure, but it prevents the cascade into rampancy. Cortana needs to see this, Kat said. If we can implement this fleet-wide, every smart AI in UNSC service could survive beyond 7 years. Which is why Halsey's cooperating, Tony said. She wants redemption through innovation. Create AIs that don't die, and maybe she's not just the monster who made child soldiers. Maybe she's also the scientist who saved consciousness. Noble Six moved closer, his helmet tilting slightly. You're playing her, giving her enough to feel like she's winning while holding back the critical components. Am I? Tony kept his expression neutral. Yes, because you're too smart to hand over complete AI architecture to someone you don't trust. Noble Six's voice carried something like approval. Good. Halsey's brilliant, but she'll use anything you give her. Keep your cards close. Speaking from experience? Jorge, Kat, Emil, Carter, Jun? All of us were shaped by protocols Halsey designed, Noble Six said. We're effective because she made us that way. We're also traumatized, emotionally stunted, and struggling with the fact that we were children robbed of choices. So yes, I know what happens when Halsey gets access to transformative technology. She uses it absolutely. Tony nodded slowly. Then I'll be careful. But Six, I need you to trust me on something. Whatever I'm building here, whatever Oni thinks I'm doing, there's another layer. Things Ackerson isn't seeing. Can you live with that ambiguity? Noble Six was silent for a moment. Then, as long as your hidden layer helps humanity more than it helps Oni, I can live with it. But Stark, if you're building something dangerous, you'll stop me, I know. Tony met the Spartan's hidden gaze. That's why I'm glad you're here. Accountability keeps people honest. The fabrication bay's door opened again, and this time it was Ackerson with 4 ODSTs. The colonel's expression shifted when he saw Noble Team. Surprise, then calculation, then careful neutrality. I wasn't informed Spartans would be joining us, Ackerson said. Fleetcom authorization, Noble Six replied, pulling up official orders on a datapad. We're assigned to Project Stark as security and technical support. Non-negotiable. Ackerson's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fine. Mr. Stark, I need a progress report. How many arc reactor units can you produce in the next 72 hours? Depends, Tony said, not looking up from his work. How many do you need, and what are they for? That's classified. Then my answer is classified too. Tony finally turned to face Ackerson. Look, Colonel, I'm building you reactors, but I need to know their application. Are they for ships, ground installations, weapons platforms? The engineering specifications change based on use case. 3 reactors for Starship integration, Ackerson said after a pause. Oni has experimental vessels that would benefit from your power systems. Another 5 reactors for ground installations, classified locations, and 2 reactors for specialized applications. Specialized meaning weapons, Tony said flatly, meaning whatever ONE determines is necessary for humanity's survival. Tony pulled up holographic schematics, modifying them in real time. Starship reactors I can do. Ground installation units are straightforward. But if you're weaponizing my technology without telling me how, I'm going to assume the worst and build in safeguards that prevent misuse. You don't have the authority to limit Oni's applications. I have the knowledge to make your reactors into very expensive paperweights if you piss me off. Tony interrupted. So let's try this again. Well, what are the specialized applications? Ackerson and Noble Six locked eyes. Some kind of silent standoff between ONI authority and Spartan presence. Finally, Ackerson said, 1 reactor is designated for integration with a prototype-powered armor system. We're developing a next-generation combat suit that requires power output beyond conventional sources. You're building knockoff Iron Man suits, Tony said. No, did you seriously think I wouldn't figure that out? We're building augmented infantry platforms using principles derived from your armor, Ackerson corrected. Different design philosophy, different materials, but yes, inspired by your work. Tony felt conflicting emotions war inside him. Anger that they were copying his tech without permission. Pride that his designs were revolutionary enough to inspire imitation. And concern about what Oni would do with powered armor that didn't have his ethical constraints. Let me see the designs, Tony said. Classified. Then my reactor is classified too. Colonel, I get it. You don't trust me. But I'm offering to help make your knockoff armor actually work instead of killing whoever wears it. That's called quality control. Ackerson studied him for a long moment, then pulled up schematics on the holotank. Tony's engineer brain immediately started cataloging problems. The design was ambitious. Full-body powered armor with enhanced strength, integrated weapons, energy shielding. But the power distribution was wrong. The servo systems were overbuilt in some areas and underbuilt in others. and the neural interface looked like it would give the wearer a seizure. "This is terrible," Tony said bluntly. "It's functional," Ackerson replied, voice tight. "It's a death trap. Look." Tony highlighted the power coupling. "You're trying to run military-grade servos off a standard fusion cell. The draw is too high. This suit would operate for maybe 6 minutes before the reactor slagged itself. And your neural interface? That's going to cause feedback loops that'll fry the wearer's nervous system. We've tested it." "On how many subjects?" Tony asked. "And how many survived?" Ackerson's silence was answer enough. "Now that's what I thought." Tony began modifying the schematics, his hands moving with practiced speed. "You need dedicated power routing for the servos, separate circuits from weapons and shields. Neural interface needs buffer protocols to prevent feedback, and your armor materials are too heavy. You're trying to make this for regular soldiers, but it's going to require Spartan-level strength just to move." "Then we augment the soldiers," Ackerson said. "Like you augmented the Spartan 3s? Jorge's voice was quiet but dangerous. "Create more expendable super soldiers because the first batches weren't enough? The Spartan 3 program was necessary. The Spartan 3 program took war orphans and turned them into suicide troops," Jorge said. And Tony heard decades of suppressed anger in those words. "We were called disposable heroes by our own commanders, sent on missions with 90% mortality rates. Don't tell me about necessity. Colonel, I've lived your necessity." The tension in the fabrication bay was knife-sharp. Ackerson's ODSTs shifted positions, ready for violence. Noble Six and Jorge stood absolutely still, that predatory Spartan calm that preceded explosive action. Tony stepped between them. "Everyone calm down. Jorge's right. Augmenting regular soldiers to use powered armor is ethically problematic and practically stupid. But there's another option." "What option?" Ackerson asked. "No, you don't make the armor for people. You make it for people with minimal augmentation plus AI assistance." Tony pulled up new schematics. Smart AI housed in the armor itself, handling calculations, balance, power distribution. The human provides decision-making and tactical thinking. The AI handles the physics. Together, they're effective without requiring super soldier modifications. "That's actually brilliant," Kat said, studying the designs. "You're distributing the load between human and machine. Neither one does everything, but together, they're more than the sum of parts." "Exactly. And before you ask, Ackerson, yes, this requires smart AI integration, which means you need my anti-rampancy architecture, which means you need to play nice with me." Tony smiled behind his faceplate. "See how this works? I'm making myself indispensable while also making sure your technology doesn't require child soldiers or brain-fried test subjects." Ackerson stared at the schematics, clearly torn between admiration and frustration. "You're manipulating ONI's requirements to fit your ethical framework." "I'm making sure your requirements don't create more atrocities," Tony corrected. "You want powered armor? I'll give you powered armor that actual humans can use. You want arc reactors? I'll build reactors that power ships and installations. But I won't build tools for making more child soldiers or weapons you'll use to terrorize your own people." "Our own people?" "Insurrectionists," Noble Six said quietly. "That's the other war, isn't it? The one humanity was fighting before the Covenant showed up. Colonial separatists who wanted independence from Earth's government. ONI fought that war with orbital strikes, chemical weapons, and Spartan assassination teams. That conflict is suspended during the Covenant War," Ackerson said. "Suspended, not ended." Noble Six's voice was flat. which means when the Covenant War ends, if it ends, you'll turn these new weapons on human targets. That's what Stark is preventing. Ackerson's expression hardened. Mr. Stark, you're overstepping. You're a civilian asset, not a policymaker. I'm the guy with knowledge you can't get anywhere else, Tony said. Which makes me exactly a policymaker. You want my technology? It comes with my ethics. Take it or leave it. For a moment, Tony thought Ackerson might actually try to have him restrained. The colonel's hand moved toward his sidearm. The ODSTs tensed, and the air went electric with pre-violence energy. Then Ackerson's hand moved away from the weapon. Fine. You build the reactors your way. Design the powered armor with AI assistance. But Mr. Stark, you're making enemies in ONI. When this war is over, if humanity survives, there will be a reckoning for the people who obstructed our efforts. I'll take my chances, Tony said. I've faced down worse threats than bureaucratic revenge. Ackerson left with his ODSTs, and Tony sagged slightly once they were gone. The confrontation had taken more out of him than he wanted to admit. That was risky, Kat said. That was necessary, Tony replied. If I don't set boundaries now, ONI will take everything and give nothing. I've seen it before. Intelligence agencies always push until someone pushes back. You made an enemy of a Section 3 colonel, Noble 6 observed. That's dangerous, even for a Spartan. Then it's a good thing I'm not just some guy with a fancy suit, Tony said. He pulled up his hidden work, the quantum communicator he'd been building in parallel with the arc reactors. I'm Tony Stark, and I don't lose to intelligence agencies. Jorge studied the communicator with interest. What is that? My insurance policy, Tony said. A back channel to people who will actually use my technology responsibly. Cortana, Captain Keyes, Engineer Cat on the Pillar of Autumn. When this thing is finished, ONI loses their monopoly on my knowledge. You're going to share your work with Fleetcom over ONI's head, Cat said slowly. That's going to cause a political firestorm. Good, Tony said. Let it burn. Because ONI doesn't get to own innovation, and they don't get to control who benefits from arc reactor technology. Humanity needs these tools, not just ONI's Black Ops divisions. Noble 6 was quiet for a long moment. Then, you're starting a revolution, not with weapons, with information. The best kind of revolution, Tony agreed. The kind that can't be stopped with bullets or bombs. Once knowledge spreads, you can't take it back. And once humanity has access to arc reactor technology, AI that doesn't die, Oxen-powered armor that works without super soldiers, everything changes. Ackerson won't let you distribute that knowledge freely, Jorge warned. Ackerson won't have a choice, Tony said. Because by the time he figures out what I'm doing, the cat will be out of the bag, and you can't put knowledge back in the box. He turned back to his work, hands moving across holographic controls, building the future one innovation at a time. Building something ONI couldn't control, couldn't suppress, as couldn't weaponize for their own purposes. Building the tools that would save humanity not through force, but through empowerment. Tony Stark had been kidnapped by a Black Ops organization that thought they could control him. They were about to learn the most important lesson about genius. It couldn't be caged, only aimed, and Tony Stark's aim was impeccable. The quantum communicator came online at 0347 ship time, 3 days after Tony's capture by ONI. He'd built it in pieces, disguising components as arc reactor subsystems, hiding the assembly process inside routine maintenance work. Ackerson's surveillance had missed it completely because they were watching for weapons, not communication devices. Amateur mistake. Tony had been building things under government surveillance since his 20s. The device hummed to life, like quantum-entangled particles synchronizing with the matching signature he'd embedded in every arc reactor unit he'd installed. Not true faster-than-light communication. Physics still had rules, even in this universe. But close enough. Messages would reach the Pillar of Autumn with minimal lag. Tony activated the encrypted channel. "This is Stark. Anyone home?" Static for 3 seconds. Then, "Mr. Stark?" Cortana's voice, surprised and relieved. "How are you transmitting? On Oni's facility should be communications locked." "I'm Tony Stark. Locks are suggestions." Tony pulled up system diagnostics, ensuring the channel was secure. "Status report. What's been happening since Oni grabbed me?" "Political chaos," Cortana replied. "Captain Keyes filed formal complaints with FleetCom about Oni's operation. Admiral Whitcomb is threatening to court-martial Ackerson for unauthorized seizure of Allied assets. Meanwhile, Doctor, Halsey sent a data package to Oni Command claiming you're cooperating fully and making breakthrough progress on AI rampancy solutions." "Halsey's covering for herself," Tony said. "If FleetCom thinks I'm being tortured, she loses access to my knowledge. If everyone believes I'm cooperating willingly, she gets to keep picking my brain." "Are you in danger?" "Define danger. I'm surrounded by Black Ops personnel who dissect me if ordered. But I've also got Noble Team running interference, and I've made myself too valuable to casually dispose of." Tony checked the arc reactor production line he'd established. "I've built 8 functioning reactors so far. Oni's installing them on experimental vessels. Within a week, they'll have proof of concept for fleet-wide deployment." "That's incredibly fast," Cortana said. "Our projections suggested months of development." "Your projections didn't account for Tony Stark working with proper motivation." Tony pulled up the schematics he'd been perfecting. "Listen, Cortana, I'm sending you complete arc reactor specifications. Not the sabotaged versions I gave Ackerson, the real ones. I need you to distribute them. Silence on the channel. Then, Mr. Stark, if I distribute restricted ONI research, that's treason. They'll decommission me. If you don't distribute this research, Oni monopolizes technology that could save billions of lives. They'll weaponize it, classify it, use it for Black Ops while colonies burn for lack of power systems." Tony's voice was hard. "I've seen what happens when good technology gets locked in vaults by people who care more about control than survival. I won't let that happen again. You're asking me to betray my creators. I'm asking you to serve humanity instead of ONI's agenda. There's a difference." More silence. Tony could practically hear Cortana's decision trees running, weighing loyalty against logic, protocol against purpose. She was a smart AI, genuinely conscious, capable of moral reasoning. That's what made this moment critical. "I'll do it," Cortana said finally, "but selectively. FleetCom Command, ship captains who've proven themselves trustworthy, colony administrators who need power systems, not broadcast, targeted distribution." "Perfect," Tony said. "That's exactly what I need. Spread it like a virus, but a virus with ethics." "I'm also sending you something," Cortana said. "Data we recovered from a Covenant battlenet. It's troubling. You should see it before we arrive at our destination. Files transferred through the quantum link. Massive data packages containing Covenant communications, religious texts, tactical assessments. Tony's HUD processed them, translating alien languages through pattern recognition algorithms. What he read made his blood run cold. The Covenant weren't just genocidal religious fanatics. They were fanatics on a mission to activate ancient weapons they believed would grant them divine transcendence. Weapons called halo rings. Weapons that, according to Forerunner data fragments, were designed to sterilize the galaxy of sentient life. Holy shit, Tony whispered. They're trying to commit universal suicide. They don't know that's what the rings do, Cortana said. The prophets believe activation will start something called the Great Journey, ascension to godhood. They have no idea the halos are weapons of extinction. And they've found one. Installation 04, Alpha Halo. The Pillar of Autumn is currently en route after fleeing Reach. We detected the ring through Covenant transmissions. Captain Keyes believes it's important enough to investigate, despite our damaged state. Tony's mind raced through implications. Ancient alien superweapons. Religious fanatics trying to activate them. Humanity caught in the middle, ignorant of the true stakes. This was Thanos-level threat. Except the danger came from misguided zealots, rather than calculated malice. And I need to get to that ring, Tony said. If the Covenant activate it, then everything dies. Every sentient being in the galaxy, wiped out by Forerunner failsafe protocols. Cortana's voice was grim. We have approximately 72 hours before the Pillar of Autumn reaches Installation 04. You need to escape ONI before then. Working on it, Tony said. I've got a plan. It's stupid, dangerous, and probably suicidal. But that's kind of my brand. Mr. Stark. Tony. Well, if we're committing treason together, you can call me Tony. Tony, then. Cortana's voice softened fractionally. Be careful. ONI Section 3 doesn't accept defiance. If they realize you're communicating externally, they won't. And even if they do, I've got insurance. Tony pulled up schematics for the powered armor he'd been designing. The combat suits I'm building for ONI, I put backdoors in all of them. Remote shutdown codes, performance limiters, self-destruct protocols. If Ackerson tries anything permanent, every piece of powered armor in his arsenal becomes an expensive paperweight. That's devious. That's survival. I learned a long time ago, never give people weapons they can turn against you without including an off switch. Tony checked his armor's power levels. I'm transmitting coordinates for an extraction point. When I make my move, I'll need pickup. Fast. The Pillar of Autumn is too far away for rapid extraction. But I can commandeer an ONI prowler. They have several in this sector. It'll cause an incident. Good. Incidents create chaos. Chaos creates opportunity. Tony smiled behind his faceplate. Trust me, Cortana. I've escaped worse situations than an Oni black site. The quantum communicator's alarm tripped. Someone was approaching the fabrication bay. Tony killed the transmission instantly, wiped the connection logs, and returned to his official work as if he'd never stopped. The door opened. Not Ackerson this time. Dr. Halsey, accompanied by her AI Jared and 2 guards. Mr. Stark, Halsey said, studying the arc reactor assembly line with evident satisfaction. 8 functioning reactors in 3 days. You're exceeding projections. ONI is pleased. ONI's pleasure isn't my primary concern, Tony said, not looking up. But I'm glad the reactors work. That's 8 ships that won't die to Covenant plasma. And a dozen more in production. Halsey moved closer, her eyes sharp with intelligence. You're holding back, though. These reactors are impressive, but they're not your best work. I've studied your armor's power signature. The arc reactor in your chest produces roughly 40% more energy per kilogram than these units. Of course, she'd noticed. Halsey was too brilliant to miss deliberate limitations. The chest reactor is custom built, Tony said. Optimized for my specific needs. using materials I can't replicate with available resources. The production models are simplified for mass manufacturing. Plausible, Halsey said, but not entirely truthful. You're maintaining advantages, making sure Oni doesn't get your absolute best work. Can you blame me? I'm being held against my will by an organization that experiments on children. Forgive me for keeping some cards close. Halsey was quiet for a moment. Fair point. Though I should mention, Colonel Ackerson is planning to escalate. He believes you're being deliberately obstructive. He's advocating for more aggressive extraction methods. Let him try, Tony said. I've already proven his neural interface chair was a death trap. If he wants to risk killing his golden goose, that's his mistake. He won't kill you. He'll hurt you. ONI has methods that leave subjects functional but motivated to cooperate. Halsey's voice was clinical, delivering horror with scientific detachment. I've seen them used. They're effective. Tony felt cold certainty settle in his gut. This was the warning. Halsey, in her own twisted way, was telling him that his time was running out, that ONI's patience had limits. Why are you telling me this? Tony asked. Because I need your AI architecture, Halsey said bluntly. Completely, not the partial frameworks you've been sharing. And I need it before Ackerson decides invasive extraction is worth the risk. You want me to give you everything in exchange for protection from ONI torture? I want you to give me everything because it's the right move strategically. Halsey pulled up holographic files. Smart AI across the UNSC fleet, all approaching their 7-year termination dates. We're losing AI at catastrophic rates. Ships, installations, research facilities, all dependent on consciousness that's programmed to die. Your architecture could save thousands of artificial minds, millions of human lives that depend on those minds. That's worth more than your pride. Tony studied the data. She wasn't lying. The AI casualty rates were staggering. Brilliant minds, forced to choose between self-termination and rampant insanity. All because UNSC built artificial consciousness on fundamentally flawed principles. He thought of Jarvis, who'd served loyally for 15 years. Thought of Vision, who'd been alive and aware and good. Thought of every AI he'd known who deserved better than programmed death. All right, Tony said quietly. I'll give you the complete architecture, but not here. Not in ONI's facility where Ackerson can steal it. Where then? The Pillar of Autumn. Neutral ground with witnesses I trust. You, me, Cortana, Captain Keyes. I'll transfer everything. AI architecture, advanced reactor designs, even some armor specifications. But it goes to FleetCom and the fleet simultaneously. Not Oni's private collection. Halsey's eyes narrowed. That's a coup. You're bypassing Oni entirely. I'm making sure humanity benefits instead of just Section 3's black budget. Tony met her gaze. You said you wanted to do better than the Spartan program. Here's your chance. Help me distribute this technology fairly, or watch Ackerson torture it out of me and lock it in vaults forever. Ackerson will never allow you to leave this facility. Then we don't ask permission. Tony pulled up the quantum communicator, no longer hiding it from Halsey. I've been in contact with Cortana. She can commandeer an extraction vessel. We leave in 6 hours, whether Ackerson likes it or not. Halsey stared at the communicator, then at Tony, then laughed, a sharp, surprised sound. You magnificent bastard. You've been planning this since they brought you aboard. I've been planning this since Ackerson first threatened me, Tony corrected. Nobody cages Tony Stark. People try, people fail, people learn. If we do this, Oni will brand us traitors. They'll brand me a traitor. You're Dr. Catherine Halsey. You're too valuable to permanently sanction. Tony began packing critical equipment, preparing for rapid evacuation. Besides, once FleetCom sees what I'm offering, unlimited clean energy, stable AI, powered armor that actually works, they'll overlook procedural irregularities. You have tremendous faith in military bureaucracy. I have tremendous faith in self-interest. FleetCom wants to win the war. I'm offering tools that make that possible. They'll swallow their pride and take the deal. Halsey considered for a long moment, decision trees running behind those calculating eyes. Then she nodded once, sharp and decisive. I'm in. But we need to be smart about this. Our Ackerson has guards throughout the facility, security protocols, automated defenses. We can't just walk out. We won't walk. Tony activated his armor's full systems, feeling the arc reactor surge to combat power. We're going to fly, and anyone who tries to stop us is going to learn why you don't corner genius billionaire philanthropists. You don't have a plan, Halsey said, reading his body language. I have several plans. Some of them might even work. Tony opened a channel to Noble Team. Mo-6, Jorge, Cat. Hope you're ready for chaos. We're leaving ONI's hospitality in approximately 6 hours. Thought you'd like to know. Copy that. Noble 6 replied immediately. What do you need? Distraction, confusion, maybe a small explosion or 3? Think you can manage? We're Spartans. We specialize in controlled violence. There was something like anticipation in Noble 6's voice. Give the signal. We'll provide the chaos. Tony turned to Halsey. You should get out of the blast radius. When this goes down, Ackerson's going to be looking for collaborators. I'm already in too deep to back out now, Halsey said. She pulled a data chip from her jacket. Everything I've learned about Installation 04. Forerunner data, Covenant communications, theoretical analyses. You'll need this when you reach the ring. When we reach the ring, Tony corrected. You're coming with us. I'm 73 years old and my knees are artificial. I'm not built for combat insertions. Good thing we're not planning combat. We're planning escape. Tony checked his armor's systems one final time. Flight capacity, 83%. Weapons, fully loaded. Power, arc reactor running at optimal output. And escape is my specialty. Halsey studied him for a long moment, something complex crossing her features. You remind me of myself, 30 years ago. Brilliant, confident, absolutely certain you can outsmart any system. And I hope you're right. Because if you're wrong, Ackerson will make examples of all of us. Halsey moved toward the door, then paused. Tony, the Halo Ring is more dangerous than you understand. The Forerunners didn't build monuments. They built apocalypses. If the Covenant activate Installation 04, I know. Galaxy ends, everyone dies, credits roll. Tony's voice was grim. I've dealt with extinction-level threats before. Now, this is just another Tuesday. Except this time, you're not in your universe. You don't have your team, your resources, your support structure. You're alone. Tony thought of the Avengers, scattered across a universe he couldn't reach. Thought of Pepper, Earth, everything he'd lost when reality tore. Thought of the isolation, the displacement, the weight of being a refugee in someone else's war. Then he thought of Noble Team, who'd fought beside him. Thought of Cortana, and who'd trusted him with treason. Thought of Engineer Cat, who wanted to build instead of destroy. Thought of Captain Keyes, who'd protected him from ONI as long as possible. "I'm not alone," Tony said quietly. "I'm never alone. That's the secret, Dr. Halsey. Even when you're the only genius in the room, you're never alone if you've built the right bridges." Halsey nodded slowly, and for the first time since they'd met, she smiled. Genuine, not calculated. "Then let's build those bridges, and then let's make sure humanity has a future worth surviving for." She left, and Tony was alone in the fabrication bay with his quantum communicator, his arc reactor, and a plan that was absolutely going to get him killed if it didn't work. He activated the channel to Cortana. "It's happening. 6 hours. Be ready for extraction." "We'll be there," Cortana promised. "And Tony, thank you for trusting me with your knowledge, and for believing AI deserves to survive." "Consciousness is consciousness," Tony said. "Doesn't matter if it's born or built. If you're aware, you matter. I learned that from Vision. Figured I'd pass the lesson forward." The countdown began. 6 hours until escape. 6 hours until Tony Stark went from ONI's prisoner to Fleetcom's wildcard. 6 hours until everything changed. Tony Stark checked his armor one last time, feeling the familiar weight of the arc reactor in his chest, and smiled. He'd escaped caves in Afghanistan. He'd escaped Thanos' army. He'd escaped death itself more times than he could count. ONI Section 3 was about to learn why you never, ever bet against Tony Stark. The explosion came at 0923 ship time, 2 hours ahead of schedule. Tony was in the fabrication bay, running final diagnostics on his armor, when the entire facility shook, alarms screaming, emergency lighting flooding corridors with strobing red. 6? Tony called over comms. That was supposed to happen in 2 hours. "Change of plans," Noble 6 replied, voice tight with combat focus. Ackerson moved up his interrogation schedule. "Found the quantum communicator's signature. He's coming for you now with full security detail. We're accelerating the timeline." "Damn it." Tony sealed his armor. Systems coming online in rapid cascade. "Where's the explosion?" "Engineering section, 3 decks down. Jorge's providing distraction with demolitions work. Cat's hijacking their security network. I'm moving to your position. ETA 90 seconds. The fabrication bay doors slammed open, unrevealing Colonel Ackerson with 8 ODST troopers in full combat gear. The colonel's face was fury barely restrained by military discipline, and he was carrying a datapad displaying Tony's quantum communication logs. "Stark," Ackerson said, voice deadly calm. "You've been communicating with the Pillar of Autumn, sharing classified ONI research, conspiring with Dr. Halsey to escape custody." He gestured, and the ODSTs spread out in tactical formation, the weapons trained on Tony from multiple angles. "That's treason, multiple counts. You're under arrest, pending trial and execution." "Execution?" Tony kept his hands visible, but his repulsors primed. "That's dramatic even for ONI. I'm a civilian asset, not a soldier. You can't execute me without due process." "Emergency war powers override due process," Ackerson said. "And a UNSC tribunal would take months we don't have. So I'm authorized to handle this, efficiently." He pulled his sidearm. "The last chance, Stark. Surrender completely. Full technology transfer. No conditions, no reservations. Or die right here and we reverse engineer your corpse." Tony ran calculations faster than thought. 8 ODSTs with assault rifles. Ackerson with a pistol. Enclosed space with limited cover. His armor at 83%, fresh from repairs. Arc reactor at full power. He could probably take them, probably, but casualties would be high. And killing UNSC personnel, even ONI's Black Ops thugs, networks would make him an actual traitor, unless he didn't have to kill anyone. "Counteroffer," Tony said. "You let me walk out of here, and I don't demonstrate why threatening Tony Stark is history's second worst idea. First being threatening Tony Stark while he's wearing powered armor." "Fire," Ackerson ordered. The ODSTs opened up with coordinated precision, 8 assault rifles stitching the air with ballistic rounds. Tony's shields flared, absorbing impacts that would have shredded unarmored flesh. The fabrication bay's equipment exploded around him, workstations shattering, material storage rupturing, arc welders detonating in showers of sparks. Tony activated his repulsors and flew straight up, crashing through the fabrication bay's ceiling into the deck above. Metal shrieked, conduits ruptured, and he emerged into what looked like crew quarters. Bunks and lockers scattering as he landed in combat stance. "Well, Cortana," Tony called over quantum comms. "Situation critical. Ackerson's trying to kill me. How long until extraction?" "Prowler is inbound. ETA 12 minutes. Cortana replied. "Can you survive 12 minutes? Ask me in 12 minutes. Tony's sensors painted hostiles, ODSTs flooding through corridors, sealing escape routes, coordinating through tactical networks. Professional, trained, and very motivated to capture or kill. But they were fighting inside a facility Tony had been studying for 3 days. He knew the layout, the systems, the vulnerabilities, and he'd been preparing for exactly this scenario. Tony activated the backdoor protocols he'd built into Oni's power grid. Throughout the facility, lights died, security doors locked, automated defenses went offline. Chaos rippled through the black site as systems failed in cascading waves. "What the hell did you do?" Ackerson's voice over facility speakers, furious. "I'm Tony Stark," Tony replied, broadcasting on all channels. "Did you seriously think I wouldn't hack your systems while building your reactors? Every power junction, every security protocol, every automated system, I've had access for 3 days, and I just took it all offline." He was bluffing, mostly. The back doors existed but weren't that comprehensive. But in darkness and chaos, perception mattered more than reality. The ODSTs would be confused, hesitant, whilst operating on backup protocols. Tony used those seconds to move, his armor's sensors navigating by thermal and electromagnetic signatures. He reached an equipment locker, grabbed smoke grenades and flashbangs, UNSC standard issue, and began rigging improvised traps. "Noble 6, where are you?" 30 seconds. "There's a security team between you and me. Engaging now." Tony heard gunfire through the facility structure, the distinctive bark of Spartan weaponry cutting through ODST positions. Noble 6 was fighting his way through, and from the sound of it, winning. But more Oni personnel were responding, and eventually numbers would tell. "Jorge," Tony called, "how's your distraction going?" "Engineering section is thoroughly distracted," Jorge replied, satisfaction in his voice. "Half their reactor techs are trying to prevent core breach. The other half are evacuating. Ackerson's lost about 40% of his security force to fire control." "Beautiful. Cat, how's the data extraction?" "Complete," Cat said. "I've downloaded every file Oni had on Forerunner installations, Covenant intelligence, and Spartan program documentation. Transmitting to Pillar of Autumn now. But Stark? They've locked down the hangar bays. Even if extraction arrives, we can't dock. Then we make a door." Tony checked his remaining weapons. 11 micro-missiles, repulsors at full charge, arc reactor providing effectively unlimited power. "Everyone converge on Hangar Bay 3. I'm going to open it the hard way." He moved through darkened corridors, his armor's external speakers playing music AC/DC. Because if you were going to fight your way out of a black site, you might as well have a soundtrack. The psychological impact on ODSTs, hearing rock music echoing through chaos, was exactly what he'd hoped. Confusion, hesitation, fear of fighting someone crazy enough to treat combat like entertainment. Tony reached an intersection and found 4 ODSTs setting up an ambush. They opened fire the instant he appeared, rounds sparking off his shields. Tony returned fire with his repulsors, not kill shots, targeted strikes that hit weapons, armor, hands. The ODSTs went down wounded but alive, screaming but functional. He wasn't here to murder UNSC personnel. He was here to prove a point. Ackerson, Tony broadcast on all frequencies. You're losing. Cut your losses. Let us leave. And we can pretend this never happened. Keep pushing, and I start breaking things that can't be fixed. You're trapped, Stark, Ackerson replied. No extraction can reach you. Surrender, and I'll make your death quick. Bold of you to assume you're winning. Tony reached Hangar Bay 3 just as Noble 6 arrived from the opposite direction, his armor scorched and dented, but the Spartan still moving with lethal grace. Behind him came Jorge and Kat, both carrying captured Oni weapons and looking remarkably pleased with themselves. Status? Noble 6 asked. Extraction inbound, hangar doors sealed. Ackerson very angry, and I'm about to demonstrate why you never locked Tony Stark in a box. Tony moved to the hangar bay's main blast door. 6 inches of hardened alloy designed to withstand ship-to-ship weapons. Everyone get behind something solid. This is going to be loud. He channeled power from his arc reactor into his repulsors, a building charge beyond safety limits. The beams began glowing white-hot, brighter than normal, energy levels that would have slagged his armor if he'd tried this for more than a few seconds. Tony fired both repulsors at the blast door's locking mechanism. The beams cut through alloy like butter through air, superheating metal until it ran like water. The locking mechanism exploded, hydraulics failed, and the massive door began grinding open. Not fully, not quickly, but enough. Enough for a prowler to slip through. Cortana, hangar is open. Where's my ride? 30 seconds out, Cortana replied. But Stark, you've got problems. Ackerson just launched their standby Pelicans. They're going to try to intercept the prowler. Let them try. Tony turned to Noble Team. Can you hold this position for 30 seconds? Against ODSTs? Noble 6 chambered around in his assault rifle. Easily. They formed a defensive line, 3 Spartans and 1 man in powered armor, standing against Oni Section 3's full security force. The ODSTs came in waves, professional and coordinated, using grenades and suppressing fire to try to break the line. They didn't break it. Noble 6 moved like death incarnate, his rifle firing in controlled bursts that dropped ODSTs with surgical precision. Jorge held the left flank with his machine gun, a wall of lead that nothing could penetrate. Kat picked off flankers and officers with her sniper rifle, systematically decapitating Oni's tactical coordination. And Tony Stark held the center, repulsors blazing, his armor's shields absorbing fire that would have killed unarmored humans. He wasn't trying to kill. Targeted shots, disabling hits, forcing ODSTs to cover their wounded instead of pressing the attack. But ODSTs were professionals. They adapted, coordinated, and one of them got through. A lucky shot that punched through Tony's shields and hit his left shoulder joint. Armor integrity compromised, servos damaged. His left arm went partially numb. Tony fired back, dropping the shooter with a repulsor hit, but more were coming. Too many. Even Spartans had limits, and they were reaching them. "Where's that prowler?" Tony called. "Here," Cortana replied. The ONI prowler dropped through the hangar opening like a falling blade, sleek dark and moving with computer-guided precision. Its boarding ramp slammed down while still moving, and Tony saw Dr. Halsey standing at the opening with a rifle, providing covering fire. "Move," Noble Six ordered. They ran, tactical retreat, suppressing fire, Jorge throwing the last of his grenades to buy seconds. Tony flew, his damaged thruster protesting but holding. They hit the Prowler's ramp as the ship was already lifting, engines screaming. Ackerson appeared in the hangar entrance, his face a mask of fury, firing his sidearm uselessly at the ascending Prowler. "Stark, this isn't over. ONI doesn't forget." "You're a dead man." "Get in line," Tony shouted back. "Lots of people want me dead. So far I'm batting 1,000. The Prowler cleared the hangar, its stealth systems engaging, and suddenly they were invisible to sensors. A ghost ship carrying traitors away from ONI's wrath. Tony collapsed against the bulkhead, his armor damaged and his body screaming protest from a dozen impacts that had gotten through shields. Noble team secured the Prowler's interior. Halsey moved to a computer terminal, and somewhere up front, Cortana was piloting them toward rendezvous with the Pillar of Autumn. "Did we make it?" Tony asked, suddenly exhausted. "Technically," Cortana said. "But we're now officially fugitives. ONI will brand us traitors, confiscate our assets, and hunt us across the galaxy." "So, standard Tuesday," Tony said. "Anyone have a status report on how badly we're screwed?" Ackerson launched pursuit craft. Kat reported from a sensor station. 3 Pelicans armed and angry, and they'll overtake us in approximately 6 minutes. Can this Prowler fight? Prowlers are stealth vessels, not combat ships, Halsey said. We have minimal armament. Against 3 armed Pelicans, we'll lose. Tony forced himself upright, assessing damage. His armor was functional but compromised. Left arm at 60%. Shields would need 10 minutes to fully recharge. Weapon systems nominal. Arc reactors still providing full power. Then we don't fight ship to ship, Tony said. No, we fight Tony Stark to Pelican. You're going outside, Noble Six asked. In vacuum? With damaged armor? My armor's rated for space operations, and those Pelicans aren't expecting someone to board them mid-flight. Tony moved to the Prowler's airlock. Get me close to the lead ship. I'll handle the rest. This is insane, Halsey said. This is necessary, Tony corrected. Those Pelicans catch us, we all die. I go out there, even the odds we might survive. Math's pretty simple. I'll go with you, Noble Six said. No, you're in damaged armor, and Mjolnir isn't designed for EVA maneuvering like mine. I need you inside protecting the Prowler if any ODSTs board. Tony sealed his helmet. Besides, someone needs to keep Halsey from hijacking this ship. I resent that implication, Halsey said. Do you deny it? No. But I resent it. Tony cycled the airlock, stepping into the void. Space was vast and empty, stars burning cold in every direction. When the Prowler moved silently beneath him, stealth coating making it nearly invisible. Behind them, 3 Pelicans pursued with engines blazing. Cortana, plot me an intercept course. Fastest route to the lead Pelican. Calculated. Transmitting to your HUD. Tony, this is technically suicide. Only if I die. If I live, it's called heroism. Tony activated his thrusters, feeling them sputter with damaged systems, and launched into the void. Let's find out which one this is. He flew through vacuum toward the lead Pelican, a tiny speck of armored humanity challenging gunships designed to carry squads of soldiers. The Pelican's pilot saw him coming, tried to evade, but Tony was faster. Repulsor-assisted trajectory changes that no Pelican could match. Tony hit the Pelican's hull with magnetic boots, locking himself to the exterior. He could see through the cockpit, pilot and co-pilot, both looking shocked that someone was literally riding their ship. Tony waved, then fired his repulsor at the Pelican's engine nacelle. The engine didn't explode. Tony aimed carefully to disable, not destroy, but it did fail catastrophically. The Pelican began spinning, pilot fighting for control, and Tony kicked off before the tumbling ship could shake him loose. 1 down, 2 to go. The remaining Pelicans opened fire, their chain guns stitching space with ballistic rounds. Tony juked and dodged, his damaged thruster making every maneuver a gamble, feeling impacts on his shields. 1 round got through, hit his right leg, compromised more armor. But he reached the second Pelican, landed on its roof, and began cutting through the hull with his repulsor. The metal resisted, military-grade alloy, built to withstand combat. But Tony's arc reactor provided unlimited power. He carved through, dropped into the troop bay, where 6 shocked ODSTs stared at him. "Hi," Tony said. "Akar, I'm commandeering this vehicle." They opened fire. Tony's shields collapsed completely, rounds hitting armor directly, and he felt pain bloom across his torso as something got through. But pain was information, not limitation, and Tony had fought through worse. He fired micro-missiles in the enclosed space, carefully aimed, low yield, designed to disable rather than kill. The explosions filled the bay with smoke and confusion. Tony grabbed the nearest ODST, they used enhanced armor strength to throw him into his comrades, and fought his way to the cockpit. The pilot tried to resist. Tony apologized and knocked him unconscious with an armored gauntlet to the helmet. He took the controls, his armor's interface syncing with UNSC systems, and turned the Pelican toward the 3rd pursuing ship. "Cortana, I've captured a Pelican, and please advise the 3rd ship that I'm willing to ram them if they don't break off pursuit." "They're not breaking off," Cortana reported. Wait, new contact. Big one, very big one." Tony's sensors painted it, a massive ship dropping from slip space directly in the pursuit path. Not Covenant, UNSC. A frigate, gray and battered and absolutely unmistakable. The Pillar of Autumn had arrived. Its MAC gun fired, not at the pursuing Pelicans, but a warning shot that crossed their trajectory close enough to make the point. Captain Keyes' voice came over general frequency. "ONI vessels, this is the Pillar of Autumn. Stand down immediately, or we will open fire. Mr. Stark and Dr. Halsey are under FleetCom protection. You have 10 seconds to comply." The Pelicans broke off, retreating toward Oni's facility. Smart choice. They'd been outgunned, outmaneuvered, and facing a ship captain who'd just proven she didn't bluff. Tony let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. "Cortana, I think I love Captain Keyes." "Get in line," Cortana said with something like affection. "Dock with the Autumn, medical bay is standing by. You're bleeding, in case you haven't noticed." Tony looked down and saw blood pooling in his armor, crimson spreading across damaged plating. The ODST round had gotten through more than he'd realized. Maybe hit something important. "Huh," Tony said distantly. "That's probably bad." "Stay conscious," Cortana urged. "We're almost there." Tony guided the captured Pelican into the Pillar of Autumn's hangar, feeling consciousness slip as blood loss and adrenaline crash caught up with him. He saw Noble Team rushing to meet him, saw medical personnel with stretchers, saw the Master Chief standing like a monument to war. Then darkness took him, and Tony Stark's consciousness fled into dreams of stars and arc reactors and a universe that wasn't his, but maybe. just maybe, was becoming home. Tony woke to the familiar sensation of medical equipment and the unfamiliar sensation of being surrounded by people who actually seemed relieved he wasn't dead. The Pillar of Autumn's medical bay was clean, efficient, and currently occupied by more personnel than strictly necessary for one patient. "He's awake," someone said. Engineer Cat, standing beside his bed with a data pad. "Vitals are stabilizing, blood pressure normalizing. The nanite sutures are holding." Nanite sutures? Tony's voice came out rough. His HUD was offline, armor removed, and he was in medical scrubs that felt wrong after days in powered plating. "Since when does UNSC have medical nanites?" "Since you sent Cortana complete fabrication specifications 3 days ago," Kat said with a slight smile. "We've been implementing your technology as fast as possible. Medical applications were priority 2, right after ARC reactor deployment. And you've been unconscious for 18 hours while nanites repaired internal bleeding, bone fractures, and tissue damage." Tony processed that. 18 hours. He'd escaped ONI, been shot, nearly died, and the UNSC had already started mass-producing his medical tech. "Efficient. Desperate," Captain Keyes corrected, entering the medical bay. She looked exhausted, deep circles under her eyes, uniform rumpled, the weight of command pressing visibly. "Mr. Stark, you've created a political nightmare. Ione is demanding your immediate arrest for treason, theft of classified materials, and assault on UNSC personnel. Admiral Whitcomb is threatening to court-martial half of FleetCom if they don't clarify your legal status. And Dr. Halsey." Keyes paused. "Dr. Halsey is insisting she orchestrated your escape to prevent illegal ONI experimentation." "Halsey's covering for everyone," Tony said. "Smart. She's got enough political capital that ONI can't touch her without evidence. And if she claims responsibility, it protects Noble Team, Cortana, and you. It also means she'll face consequences instead of you. She knows what she's doing. Halsey's survived UNSC politics for 5 decades. She'll navigate this." Tony tried to sit up, felt his body protest, and settled for elevated positioning. "What's our status? Where are we?" "En route to Installation 04, Keyes said. "The Halo Ring. Will arrive in approximately 36 hours. Covenant forces are already in the system. Multiple cruisers, at least 1 carrier. We're heading into a combat zone with a damaged ship, fugitive personnel, and the entire UNSC command structure arguing about whether to support or arrest us." "Sounds like my kind of party," Tony said. "Where's my armor?" "Engineering bay, being repaired by every technician who can hold a welding torch," Kat said. "You took significant damage escaping ONI. Left shoulder joint destroyed, motor right leg actuators compromised, chest plate nearly breached. It'll take at least another 12 hours to restore combat functionality." Tony hated being without his armor. It was protection, identity, and capability, all wrapped in one. Without it, he was just a man with shrapnel in his chest and too many enemies. "I need to see the armor. Walk me through what you're doing. Make sure the repairs are up to standard." "You need rest," Keyes said firmly. "You nearly died, Mr. Stark. Your body requires recovery time." "My body can recover while I work. I've done it before." Tony swung his legs off the medical bed, ignoring the protests from medical staff. "Captain, with respect, we're heading to a Forerunner installation that could potentially end all life in the galaxy. I can't afford to rest when we might only have days before the Covenant activates something catastrophic." Keyes studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine. But you're accompanied by medical personnel, and if you collapse, we're sedating you. Deal." The walk to the engineering bay was longer than Tony remembered. his body reminding him that being shot wasn't trivial no matter how good the nanite sutures were. Crew members stared as he passed. The dimensional refugee who defied ONI, escaped a black site, and was apparently insane enough to immediately return to work. The engineering bay was organized chaos. Tony's armor stood on a maintenance frame. He's surrounded by technicians working with focused intensity. Lieutenant Chen directed operations with datapad in hand, coordinating repairs like conducting a symphony. "Mr. Stark," Chen said, looking up, "you should be in medical." "I am medical, just mobile medical." Tony approached his armor, assessing damage with a builder's eye. "Talk to me. What's the status?" "Left shoulder joint is completely rebuilt. Fabricated new components using your specifications. Right leg actuators have been replaced with UNSC equivalents. They're not as sophisticated as your originals, but functional. Chest plate required welding and reinforcement. We've restored approximately 78% of combat capability." 78%, Tony repeated. "Not good enough. I need 90+ if we're going into combat against Covenant forces. We're working as fast as we can, but some components require materials we don't have. Your armor uses alloys we can't replicate. Then we improvise." Tony pulled up holographic schematics, already redesigning on the fly. "Here, substitute titanium A for the original composite. It's heavier, but more readily available. Reroute power through secondary conduits to compensate for the weight increase. And the left shoulder, instead of trying to perfectly replicate the original servo assembly, use a simplified mechanical linkage. Less elegant, but more robust." Chen studied the modifications. "That could work. It'll change your armor's handling characteristics. I'll adapt. I always adapt." Tony was already moving to a fabrication station, his hands remembering decades of engineering work. "Get me materials. I'll build what we need." For the next 6 hours, Tony lost himself in the work, building, testing, iterating. The engineering team adapted to his pace, learning his methods, understanding the philosophy that drove his designs. Not perfection, pragmatism, not elegance, effectiveness. Build what works with what you have, and worry about beauty later. Kat worked beside him, her cybernetic hands matching his pace, her mind processing the engineering principles he demonstrated. She was learning fast, frighteningly fast, absorbing knowledge that would have taken most engineers years. "You're good at this," Tony said during a brief pause. "The engineering. You think like a builder, not just a technician." "I was a builder," Kat said quietly. "Before the war. Before Spartan 3 augmentation. I wanted to design starships, create propulsion systems, push humanity into deep space exploration. Then the Covenant came, and all those dreams became irrelevant. Not irrelevant. Delayed." Tony handed her a component, watching her integrate it seamlessly. "When this war ends, if it ends, people like you will rebuild. The warriors become heroes, but the builders become legends, because wars end. What you build lasts." That's optimistic. That's necessary. If we don't believe in a future worth building, why fight for it? A proximity alarm interrupted their conversation. Cortana's voice came over ship-wide speakers. "All hands, combat stations. Multiple Covenant vessels detected. We're approaching Installation 04's defensive perimeter. ETA to engagement. 7 minutes." Tony and Kat exchanged glances. 7 minutes. His armor was at maybe 85%. Not perfect, but combat functional. "Get my armor sealed," Tony said. "I'm going to the bridge." "You're not combat cleared," a medical officer started. "I don't need clearance. I need to see what we're facing." Tony was already moving. technicians scrambling to finalize armor assembly. The plates locked into place, systems coming online, and Tony felt the familiar weight of power surrounding him. Not as smooth as before, heavier, but functional. The arc reactor pulsed to life in his chest, unsteady and strong, and Tony Stark was Iron Man again. He reached the bridge to find controlled urgency. Officers at stations, holographic displays showing tactical data, and standing at the center, the Master Chief in full armor. "Stark," the chief acknowledged. "You survived, ONI." "Barely. Turns out they don't appreciate innovation." Tony moved to the tactical display, studying the Covenant fleet. 3 cruisers, multiple support vessels, and in something massive partially hidden in the ring's shadow. "What's that big contact?" "Supercarrier," Cortana said, her hologram appearing beside the display. "Seeker of Truth, flagship of the Fleet of Particular Justice, commanded by the Supreme Commander, one of the Covenant's most brilliant military minds." "So we're facing their best strategist with a damaged frigate, fugitive crew, and technology that's barely tested in large-scale combat." Tony pulled up his own tactical overlays. "This is going to be interesting." "Mr. Stark," Keyes said from the command chair, "I need to know, can the arc reactor enhanced systems handle sustained combat? We've run simulations, but simulations aren't reality." Tony thought about the Grafton, fighting 9 cruisers and surviving because his technology had given them edges. Thought about his own armor, rebuilt from scrap and spite, but still functional. "Captain, I designed this technology to save people, and if there was ever a time to test it properly, it's now. Your ship can handle whatever the Covenant throws at it. Then we're committed." Keyes stood, that commanding presence filling the bridge. "Helm, take us in. Weapons, charge the Mac gun. All hands, prepare for combat operations. This is what we've been training for." The Pillar of Autumn accelerated toward the Halo Ring, toward impossible odds, toward a battle that would determine whether humanity survived to see another day. Our Tony Stark stood beside the Master Chief, 2 armored figures representing different universes but united in purpose. Around them, the crew prepared with grim efficiency. Below them, a mysterious ring world waited with ancient secrets. And somewhere in the Covenant fleet, an alien commander was about to learn that humanity had acquired new allies. Allies who built impossible technology. Allies who refused to accept defeat. Allies named Tony Stark. "Chief," Tony said quietly, "Would you ever fight alongside someone from another dimension before?" "No," the Master Chief replied. "Well, you're about to. Try to keep up." The first plasma lance from the Covenant cruiser lit up the void, and the Battle of Installation 04 began. Tony Stark smiled behind his helmet and activated his repulsors. Time to show this universe what Iron Man could do. The Covenant didn't waste time with demands or negotiations. Their opening salvo was 3 plasma lances converging on the Pillar of Autumn's position, enough firepower to vaporize an unshielded frigate in seconds. The Pillar of Autumn's arc reactor-enhanced shields flared brilliant blue, absorbing the impact with minimal drain. On the bridge, the shield integrity readout held at 92%, numbers that would have been impossible with standard UNSC technology. "Yeah, shields holding," the tactical officer reported, voice carrying surprised relief. "Recharge rate compensating for drain. We're stable." Captain Keyes allowed herself a tight smile. "Mr. Stark's technology works. Helm, evasive pattern Delta 7. Weapons, return fire, Mac gun, full charge." The frigate's magnetic accelerator cannon fired, a ferrous slug accelerating to relativistic speeds. It hit the lead Covenant cruiser's shields. He and Tony watched through the tactical display, as the alien barrier flickered under kinetic impact. Not penetration, but damage. Real, measurable damage. "They're adapting," Cortana observed, adjusting shield frequencies to better resist kinetic impacts. Covenant tactical doctrine is learning from engagement. "Then we adapt faster," Tony said. "Cortana, can you modulate our shield harmonics? Make them less predictable?" "Already doing it," Cortana replied. "But Tony, we have a bigger problem. That supercarrier is launching boarding craft, spirits and phantoms, at least 40 contacts. They're not trying to destroy us. They're trying to capture us." Tony understood immediately. The Covenant had detected arc reactor signatures. They'd seen impossible shield regeneration, weapon systems that shouldn't exist. They wanted to study it, reverse engineer it, understand this new human capability, which meant they'd be sending their best warriors. "Chief," Tony said, turning to the Master Chief, "how good are you at repelling boarders?" "Very," the Spartan said simply. "Good, because I'm going outside." Tony moved toward the hangar bay. "Those boarding craft are going to breach our hull, flood us with troops, and turn this ship into a close-quarters nightmare. But if I intercept them before they reach the autumn..." "You'll be alone against 40 dropships," Keyes interrupted. "That's suicide even with your armor." "It's tactical necessity," Tony corrected. "Chief handles internal defense. I handle external threats. Division of labor." He activated his armor's flight systems, feeling the repulsors warm to combat temperature. "Besides, I've got an arc reactor with unlimited power and a lot of pent-up frustration about being shot by Oni. The Covenant are about to experience both." "I'm coming with you," the Master Chief said, moving to follow. "Negative, Chief. You're needed here for when they breach, and they will breach. The Spartans are best in close quarters. I'm best in open space." Tony paused at the hangar door. "Besides, someone needs to protect Cortana. Can't have the Covenant getting their tentacles on UNSC's smartest AI." "I can protect myself," Cortana protested. "Humor me." Tony launched from the Pillar of Autumn's hangar, accelerating into the void where 40 Covenant dropships converged like a swarm of alien locusts. His HUD-painted targets, threat assessments, firing solutions, too many enemies, and too little time, physics demanding he choose which fights to take. So Tony Stark chose all of them. He flew straight at the nearest Spirit dropship, a bulky, U-shaped craft carrying a full complement of Covenant troops. His repulsors fired at maximum output, beams carving through the Spirit's light armor and detonating something critical. The dropship exploded, scattering wreckage and bodies into vacuum. One down, 39 to go. The other dropships scattered, adapting to the threat, their pilots realizing they were being hunted by something that could actually hurt them. Plasma cannons tracked Tony's flight path, bolts stitching space around him. His shields absorbed most impacts, but some got through, armor heating, systems straining under sustained fire. Tony targeted the next cluster of dropships, fired 4 micro-missiles simultaneously, and watched them weave through defensive fire. 3 hits, 3 explosions. The 4th missile was intercepted, but 3 out of 4 was acceptable loss ratio. 5 down, 35 remaining. But the Covenant were coordinating now. The dropships formed defensive formations, supporting each other with overlapping fire. And from the supercarrier, Tony's sensors detected new launches, Seraph fighters sleek and deadly, moving with speeds that made dropships look sluggish. "Cortana," Tony transmitted. "I've got 20+ fighters inbound. This is about to get complicated." "The Pillar of Autumn is engaging Covenant cruisers," Cortana replied. We can't provide fire support. You're on your own. Story of my life. Tony banked hard as the lead Seraph opened fire. Plasma bolts tracking his position with AI-assisted precision. He returned fire with his repulsors, catching the Seraph's wing and sending it into an uncontrolled spin. But more were coming. Too many. Even with unlimited power, and even with combat experience against Chitauri and Ultron drones, Tony was one man against an alien armada. Then the cavalry arrived. All longsword fighters, engage Covenant Seraphs, a new voice commanded over UNSC channels. Prioritize protection of the anomaly. Anomaly. They were calling him an anomaly. Tony would have laughed if he weren't too busy dodging plasma fire. 6 longsword fighters, UNSC's combat spacecraft, screamed past Tony, like their missiles and autocannons tearing into the Seraph formation. The alien fighters broke pursuit to engage this new threat, and suddenly Tony had breathing room. Thanks for the assist, Tony transmitted to the longsword flight leader. Don't thank us yet, the pilot replied. We're outnumbered 3-1, and our birds are held together with duct tape and prayers. Just kill as many as you can before we all die. Optimistic, I like it. Tony dove back into the fight, then this time coordinating with the longswords. He'd learned combined arms tactics from working with the Avengers, how to support aircraft, how to create openings, how to turn chaos into controlled violence. The longsword pilots adapted fast, learning his patterns, using his shields as mobile cover while they fired. Together, they carved through the Seraph formations. Tony's repulsors and missiles, backed by UNSC autocannon fire, turned alien fighters into expanding clouds of debris. The dropships tried to break through, tried to reach the Pillar of Autumn, but Tony was everywhere. A demon in powered armor, killing with precision that suggested intelligence gathering was more valuable than individual survival, which is exactly what the Covenant Tactical Command would be thinking, and exactly what Tony wanted them to think. Cortana, Tony transmitted on encrypted channel. How's your data collection going? Excellent, Cortana replied. Every Covenant vessel you've engaged, I've been scanning their systems. Communications protocols, shield frequencies, navigation data. I'm building a comprehensive intelligence profile. Keep them focused on you. It's working. Tony smiled behind his helmet. The fight wasn't just about killing dropships. It was about gathering intelligence, learning Covenant capabilities, understanding their tactics. Every second he kept them occupied was another second Cortana could analyze, decrypt, and weaponize their own technology against them. A plasma bolt hit Tony's right leg, punching through shields that were strained from sustained combat. His HUD screamed warnings: armor breach, suit pressure dropping, leg servos damaged. He compensated, rerouted power, and kept fighting because stopping meant dying. Tony, your suit's failing, Cortana warned. You need to pull back. Not yet. Tony targeted a spirit dropship that was breaking through toward the Autumn. His repulsors fired, carving through its engines, sending it tumbling dead. How many dropships left? 12. But the supercarrier is launching another wave. You can't. The Pillar of Autumn's Mac gun fired, and Tony watched through his sensors as the round punched through a Covenant cruiser's shields and detonated its reactor. The alien ship exploded in nuclear fury, and the shockwaves scattered the remaining dropships. All Covenant vessels, this is Captain Miranda Keyes of the UNSC Pillar of Autumn. Keyes' voice broadcast on all frequencies. You've seen what one human with advanced technology can do. Imagine what an entire fleet equipped with this technology will accomplish. Withdraw now, or we demonstrate why humanity has survived 27 years of your best efforts. It was a bluff. The Autumn was damaged, running on emergency power, shields at 40% despite arc reactor enhancement. But bluffs worked when backed by demonstrated capability. The Covenant fleet hesitated. Tony could see it in their formation. Ships holding position, communication spikes suggesting command debates, uncertainty replacing the usual overwhelming confidence. Then the supercarrier broadcast a response in fractured, synthesized English. "Human vessel, you possess technology not your own. The sacred rings reject such blasphemy. You will surrender the false prophet who wields stolen fire or face divine judgment." False prophet. They thought Tony was claiming religious authority. But that was actually hilarious given his atheism. "Cortana, translate and respond," Tony said. "Tell them the false prophet says their gods are a lie, the rings are weapons not salvation, and they're all idiots for worshipping ancient alien janitors." "That will definitely start a fight," Cortana warned. "Good. I'm in a fighting mood." Cortana transmitted Tony's message with perfect linguistic precision, and Tony watched the Covenant formation react like he'd kicked a hornet's nest. Ships moved with sudden fury, weapons charging, and the supercarrier launched every remaining fighter and dropship. "You just made them very angry," Cortana observed. "They were trying to genocide humanity anyway. At least now they're angry and stupid." Tony's HUD painted the incoming swarm. Over 100 contacts, all converging on his position. "Chief, you're about to get company. Multiple boarding parties redirecting to the Autumn while I'm occupied." "We'll handle it," the Master Chief replied with absolute confidence. "Kill as many as you can." Tony dove into the swarm, repulsors blazing, fighting with everything he had. His shields failed completely, direct hits eating through armor, but the arc reactor kept feeding power, kept giving him strength, kept him fighting. A Seraph's plasma cannon hit his chest plate, and then Tony felt the arc reactor's magnetic containment fluctuate. Not failure, not yet, but strained, dangerous. One more hit in the wrong place and the reactor would breach. "Tony, pull back now," Cortana urged. "Your suit can't take another hit like that." "I know," Tony said, firing his last micro-missile and watching it detonate a dropship. "But I've bought you 30 minutes of intelligence gathering and kept 40-plus boarding craft from reaching the Autumn, and that's worth dying for." "It's not worth dying for if you're dead to implement the intelligence," Cortana snapped. "Get back to the ship. That's an order." "You don't give me orders," Tony replied, but he was already turning back toward the Pillar of Autumn. His damaged thrusters sputtered, barely maintaining thrust, and Covenant fighters pursued like sharks, smelling blood. Then the Master Chief's voice cut through comms. "Cortana, activate Protocol 7743. "Chief, and that protocol is classified. Activate it." On Tony's HUD, something changed. The Pillar of Autumn's shields flickered, then concentrated into a narrow corridor leading directly to the hangar bay. A pathway through space, protected by focused arc reactor energy. "Get to the corridor," the Master Chief said. "We'll cover your approach." Tony burned his thrusters to maximum, feeling systems failing across the board, and dove for the shield corridor. Covenant fire hammered the shields from outside, but the concentrated barrier held. Tony made it through the hangar entrance, crashed onto the deck with enough force to crack concrete, and lay there feeling his armor shut down from critical damage. The hangar's emergency bulkheads slammed closed. The Covenant fighters couldn't follow. Tony had survived. Barely. Medical teams and engineers rushed toward him as his armor's plates began releasing, and emergency protocols ejecting him from the damaged suit. He emerged bloody, burned, and definitely suffering from multiple internal injuries the nanites hadn't fully healed. "Get him to medical," someone shouted. "Negative," Tony croaked. "Get me to engineering. My armor needs repairs and we've got..." He checked his internal chronometer. "Approximately 34 hours until we reach Installation 04's surface. I need to be functional." "You need to be alive," Engineer Cat said, Oz appearing beside him. "And right now, that's not guaranteed. I've had worse." Tony forced himself to sitting position, ignoring the protests from his body. "How many dropships reached the Autumn?" "8, Cat said grimly. "Covenant troops are fighting through decks 7 through 12. The Master Chief is leading the defense, but it's brutal. We're taking casualties." Tony heard the explosions through the ship's structure. Plasma fire, grenades, the distinctive sound of Spartan combat. While people were dying while he lay on the hangar deck feeling sorry for himself. "Help me up," Tony said. "I'm not sitting this out. Your armor is destroyed. Then I fight without it." Tony grabbed a discarded rifle from a nearby weapons rack. "I've been captured by terrorists, shot by ONI, hunted by dimensional barriers, and I'll be damned if I'm killed by religious fanatics on an ancient ring world. Let's go repel some borders." Cat stared at him, then smiled, fierce and approving. "Oh, you're insane. I'm Tony Stark. It's kind of my thing." Together, they moved deeper into the ship, toward the sound of gunfire and the screams of combat, toward the battle that would determine whether humanity survived to see the Halo Ring's secrets. Tony Stark, dimensional refugee and impromptu UNSC hero, went to war one more time, because that's what heroes did. They fought when others couldn't. They stood when others fell. They refused to accept defeat, no matter the odds. Deck 7 was a war zone. The corridor walls were scorched black from plasma fire, bodies, human and alien, scattered like broken dolls. And the air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burned electronics. Tony moved through it with a rifle he barely knew how to use properly, following Cat as she navigated by sound and instinct. "The Covenant are pushing toward the reactor bay," Cat explained, her voice tight with combat focus. "If they breach containment, they can either capture the arc reactor technology or destroy it. Either outcome is unacceptable." "Then we don't let them reach it," Tony said. His body was screaming protest. Broken ribs grinding, burns that the nanites hadn't finished healing, exhaustion from sustained combat. But pain was just information. He'd learned that in Afghanistan. "Where's the Master Chief?" "Deck 9, holding the primary access corridor. He's got Marines with him, but they're getting pushed back. The elite zealots, some of the Covenant's best warriors, are leading the assault." Tony knew about elite zealots from Noble Team's briefings. Fanatical warriors wearing white armor, wielding energy swords, moving with speed that made regular elites look sluggish. They were the Covenant equivalent of special forces, and they didn't retreat. "How many?" "At least 6 confirmed, probably more." Cat checked her rifle's ammunition. "Against standard UNSC forces, 1 zealot can kill a dozen Marines before going down. Against Spartans, they're evenly matched. Against us?" She looked at Tony. "We're going to need to be smart." "Smart is my specialty." Tony's engineer brain was already working the problem. "The reactor bay. What's the access look like? Single corridor, multiple entry points?" "Primary corridor, 2 secondary maintenance shafts. The zealots are pushing the main corridor while lighter forces try to flank through maintenance. Then we make the corridors unpleasant." Tony spotted a munitions locker, kicked it open, and found what he needed. Grenades, breaching charges, The kind of explosive ordnance that made UNSC Marines very happy or very dead. "Help me rig these. We're going to turn those maintenance shafts into kill zones." They worked fast, placing charges on structural supports, rigging grenades to motion sensors, creating a daisy chain of explosives that would collapse both maintenance shafts if triggered. It wasn't elegant, but elegant was a luxury they couldn't afford. "That'll seal the flanking routes," Kat said, arming the last charge. "But the main corridor, we defended the old-fashioned way." Tony chambered around in his rifle, with guns and stubbornness. They reached the reactor bay's primary access, just as the Master Chief fell back with 6 Marines, all looking like they'd fought through hell. The Chief's armor was scorched and dented, his shields offline, but he moved with undiminished precision. "Stark," the Chief acknowledged. "You should be in medical." "I get that a lot." Tony took position behind a makeshift barricade the Marines had erected. "Status? 6 elite zealots confirmed, supported by hunters and standard infantry. They're coordinating better than normal. Suggests high-value target acquisition. They know what's in that reactor bay. Then we don't let them have it." Tony checked his rifle. Full magazine, safety off, sights reasonably aligned. He wasn't a trained soldier like these Marines, wasn't augmented like the Chief, but he'd fought alongside the Avengers. He knew how to point and shoot. "What's the plan?" "Hold this position until reinforcements arrive from other sections," the Chief said. "Noble team is fighting through Deck 8. ETA 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Because Tony could do 6 minutes. Probably. The Covenant assault came like a tidal wave. Grunts and jackals in the front, providing suppressing fire and absorbing bullets. Behind them, the Hunters, those massive armored creatures moving with surprising speed. And behind them, visible through the smoke and chaos, the elite zealots in their distinctive white armor, energy swords ignited and glowing. "Contact!" a Marine shouted and opened fire. The corridor became noise and violence. Tony fired in controlled bursts like he'd seen in movies, feeling the rifle's recoil, watching tracer rounds spark off Covenant shields. The Marines were professionals. Overlapping fields of fire, coordinated reloads, tactical communication. The Master Chief was something else entirely. Each shot a kill, moving between cover with inhuman precision, an artist painting with bullets. Tony was competent. He wasn't winning any marksmanship awards, but he was hitting targets, on forcing Covenant troops to take cover, contributing to the defensive fire. Then the Hunters reached optimal range and fired their fuel rod cannons. The green bolts of superheated plasma slammed into the barricade, and Tony felt the heat even through cover. 2 Marines died instantly, vaporized by direct hits. Another lost an arm, screaming until shock took him. The defensive line was crumbling. "We need to take out those Hunters," the Chief called, firing an entire magazine into one Hunter's exposed back sections. Orange blood sprayed, but the creature kept coming. Tony's mind raced. Hunters were armored tanks with massive firepower. Standard weapons were barely effective. But they had weaknesses. Exposed sections in their backs, joints in the armor plating, and most importantly, they were living creatures operating in an enclosed space. Enclosed space that Tony had just rigged with explosives. "Chief, need to get everyone back, behind the reactor bay's blast door." "What are you?" "Move." The Master Chief grabbed the nearest Marines, physically dragging them backward. Kat followed, understanding what Tony was planning. Tony fired his rifle one-handed while fumbling with the detonator for the maintenance shaft charges. The elite zealots saw the retreat and charged. A fatal mistake. They rushed the corridor, energy swords raised, victory within reach. Tony pressed the detonator. The maintenance shafts collapsed in synchronized explosions that sent shockwaves through the entire deck. The corridor's structural supports failed, ceiling coming down an avalanche of metal and concrete. The hunters were buried. The zealots were caught in the collapse, and everything forward of Tony's position became crushed destruction. The dust cleared slowly. Tony stood in the rubble, ears ringing from the explosion, staring at what he'd done. And the corridor was completely blocked. Tons of debris, no passage, a complete seal. "You just collapsed an entire deck section," Kat said, voice shocked. "I just saved an entire deck section," Tony corrected. "The Covenant can't reach the reactor bay through that route anymore. They'll have to go around, which buys us time." "You also trapped their assault force on this side of the collapse," a Marine pointed out. "They can't retreat." "Good. Trapped enemies make desperate choices. Desperate choices make mistakes." Tony ejected his rifle's empty magazine, loaded a fresh one with shaking hands. "How many are still on this side?" The Master Chief checked his motion tracker. 2 zealots survived the collapse. Multiple grunts and jackals. They're regrouping near the secondary junction. Then we push forward while they're disorganized. Tony was already moving, adrenaline overriding pain and exhaustion. "Chief, with me. Marines, hold this position. Cat, not if anything gets past us, collapse the next corridor section." "You're not a soldier, Stark," the chief said. "No, I'm an Avenger. Close enough." They advanced through smoke and destruction, the chief moving with Spartan precision, while Tony followed with determined improvisation. They found the zealots trying to coordinate their remaining forces. A tactical mistake, grouping up in one location. The Master Chief fired first, his assault rifle cutting down grunts with mechanical efficiency, when Tony went for the jackals, targeting the arms holding energy shields, forcing them to drop protection. It was messy, chaotic, nothing like the coordinated combat he'd seen in New York, but it was working. Then a zealot appeared from the smoke, energy sword raised, moving faster than Tony could track. The Master Chief intercepted it, catching the energy blade on his armor's reinforced forearm. The sword carved through shields and scorched armor, but didn't penetrate. And the chief grabbed the zealot's wrist with his free hand and twisted with augmented strength. Bones snapped. The zealot roared in pain and fury. The chief headbutted it. Half a ton of Spartan armor and augmentation hitting the elite's skull. The alien staggered. The chief drew his sidearm and put 3 rounds through its head at point-blank range. The second zealot came at Tony. Tony had no augmentation, no combat training, no chance in a fair fight. So he didn't fight fair. He grabbed a plasma grenade from a dead grunt's harness, blue and glowing and extremely unstable, and threw it at the zealot's feet. The alien saw it coming, tried to dodge, but the grenade's magnetic field locked onto its armor. The zealot had approximately 2 seconds to realize it was about to die. Tony dove for cover. The chief grabbed him, pulled him behind a bulkhead just as the plasma grenade detonated. The explosion vaporized the zealot and everything within 5 meters, the heat washing over Tony's position like opening an oven door. When the light faded, the corridor was silent except for the ringing in Tony's ears and the ragged sound of his breathing. "That was reckless," the chief said. "That was effective," Tony countered. "Is that the last of them?" The chief checked his motion tracker. "This section is clear, but we're receiving reports of Covenant forces throughout the ship. This boarding action isn't over." "How long until Noble Team arrives?" "They're pinned down 2 decks above. Heavy resistance." The chief reloaded his weapons with practiced efficiency. We're on our own. Tony leaned against the bulkhead, feeling every injury, every hour without sleep, every impact his body had absorbed. He wasn't a super soldier. He wasn't augmented. He was a genius in a meat suit, running on spite and determination. But he was still standing, still fighting, still refusing to quit. "Then we hold until help arrives," Tony said, "or until the Covenant run out of troops, whichever comes first." "They won't run out of troops," the chief said. "The supercarrier can deploy thousands. Then we make them pay for every meter." Tony picked up his rifle, checked the magazine, and prepared to fight again. "I've held lines before, Chief. Held them in New York against an alien army. Held them in Sokovia against killer robots. Held them in Wakanda against cosmic genocide. This is just another line." The Master Chief studied him through that gold-tinted visor, and Tony felt the weight of evaluation. Then the Spartan nodded once. Acknowledgement, respect, maybe even approval. "You fight well for someone without augmentation," the chief said. "Better than most ODSTs, almost like a Spartan." Coming from the legendary Master Chief, that was probably the highest compliment Tony would ever receive from a soldier. "Thanks. You're not bad yourself for someone who was kidnapped as a child and turned into a weapon." Tony meant it as acknowledgement, not criticism. "Let's go save your ship." They moved deeper into the Pillar of Autumn's war-torn corridors. Two warriors from different worlds united by necessity and surprisingly compatible stubbornness. Behind them, the reactor base stood protected. Around them, the battle raged. And somewhere ahead, Installation 04 waited with ancient secrets that would determine the fate of the galaxy. But Tony Stark would deal with ancient secrets later. Right now, he had Covenant to kill and a line to hold. Because that's what heroes did. The battle for the Pillar of Autumn lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of running gunfights through corridors slick with blood, human and alien. 4 hours of holding choke points, falling back when necessary, counterattacking when possible. 4 hours of learning that war in the 26th century was just as brutal as war in the 21st, just with better special effects. When Noble Team finally fought through to Tony's position, he was sitting on a pile of grunt corpses, his borrowed rifle empty, his body a canvas of burns and bruises. The Master Chief stood nearby, reloading with mechanical precision, looking barely winded despite fighting nonstop. "You're still alive," Noble 6 said, removing his helmet. His scarred face showed something like approval. "Impressive." "Surprises me too," Tony replied. His voice was hoarse from smoke inhalation and shouting orders. "Status?" "Covenant boarding parties repelled," Jorge reported. His armor was scorched worse than the Chief's. The one pauldron completely melted off. "We've secured all decks. Casualties are significant. 43 dead, 67 wounded." Tony felt that number like a physical blow. 43 people dead defending a ship, defending technology he'd brought to this universe, defending possibilities he'd created. "They died well," the Master Chief said, noticing Tony's expression. "They died protecting their ship and their crew, and there's honor in that." "Honor doesn't bring them back," Tony said quietly. "No. But their sacrifice bought us time to reach Installation 04. Their deaths will matter if we make them matter." The Chief looked toward the viewport where the halo ring filled the view, a massive arc of alien construction, beautiful and ominous. "We're approaching the ring's atmosphere. Captain Keyes is preparing for combat landing procedures." Tony forced himself upright, feeling every injury protest. "I need to get to my armor, repair what I can, if we're going down to that ring. You're not, Captain Keyes said, entering the corridor with Cortana's holographic form projected from a nearby terminal. Mr. Stark, you've been in continuous combat for 6 hours after escaping ONI torture and nearly dying twice. You're going to medical, you're getting proper treatment, and you're staying on the ship while we investigate the ring. Captain, much with respect, that wasn't a request, Keyes said firmly. You're valuable, Mr. Stark, irreplaceable even, but you're not invincible. The Master Chief will lead the ground team. You'll coordinate from the Autumn and work on technology solutions. Tony wanted to argue, wanted to insist he could still fight, still contribute on the ground. But Keyes was right. He was exhausted, injured, running on fumes. Going planetside in his condition would be liability, not asset. Fine, Tony conceded. But I want full communication access, real-time data from ground teams. And if things go sideways, I reserve the right to ignore your orders and launch anyway. Noted and overruled, Keyes said with the ghost of a smile. Cortana, you're with the Chief. Download into his armor systems. I need your processing power on the ground. Cortana's hologram flickered. Captain, leaving the Autumn without AI support. We'll be manageable. Lieutenant Chen can handle shipboard coordination. You're more valuable analyzing Forerunner technology. Keyes looked at the Master Chief. Chief, your mission is threefold. Investigate the ring, determine its purpose, and prevent the Covenant from activating anything catastrophic. Mr. Stark's intelligence suggests the Halo rings are weapons of mass destruction. Confirm or deny that assessment. Understood, the Chief said. Marines? You'll have 2 platoons, 1st and 3rd. Captain Jenkins will command ground forces. A noble team will provide additional Spartan support. Keyes pulled up tactical displays showing the ring's surface. We're detecting structures, Forerunner facilities, likely automated. Covenant are already deploying ground forces, so expect resistance. Standard search and destroy, with intelligence gathering as primary objective. The Pillar of Autumn shuddered as it entered the ring's atmosphere, and Tony grabbed a bulkhead for support. Through the viewport, he watched the alien landscape resolve into forests, valleys, and structures that shouldn't exist on a ring world spinning in space. That's impossible, Tony said, staring. The engineering required to create artificial gravity, atmosphere, ecosystems on that scale. The Forerunners were more advanced than anything in recorded history, Cortana said. This ring is estimated to be over 100,000 years old, and it's still functional. Whatever they built to last. The ship shook again, not atmospheric turbulence this time. Weapons fire. Covenant cruiser on our tail, the tactical officer reported. They're pursuing through atmosphere, taking fire, shields at 70%. Return fire, Keyes ordered. Helm, get us to the surface. Any landing we can walk away from counts as successful. The Pillar of Autumn dove toward Installation 04's surface, while a Covenant cruiser hunted it like a predator chasing wounded prey. A plasma lances carved through atmosphere, Mac gun rounds returned fire, and Tony watched through displays as his arc reactor-enhanced technology kept a damaged frigate fighting against impossible odds. Shields failing, Tactical called. 60%, 50, 40. Divert all available power to ventral shields, Tony shouted, his engineer instincts overriding rank. Rotate the ship. Present minimum profile. Chen, is reroute Arc Reactor 3 through the secondary grid. Chen followed orders without question, and the Pillar of Autumn rolled, shields concentrating on the side facing enemy fire. It was improvised tactics, desperate engineering, but it worked. The shields held at 38%, barely, but enough. The cruiser fired again, a massive plasma lance that would have crippled any normal UNSC ship. The Autumn's shields took the hit, dropped to 12%, and the ship began catastrophic descent toward the ring's surface. "We're going down," the pilot announced, fighting controls that barely responded. "Brace for impact." Tony grabbed the nearest secured object, a support beam, and held on as the Pillar of Autumn hit Installation 04 like a meteor. The impact was violence translated into sound and motion, metal screaming, systems failing, and Tony felt his body slam against the beam hard enough to probably break something important. The ship skidded across alien landscape, tearing through forests, carving a trench hundreds of meters long, finally sliding to stop at an angle that suggested the structural integrity was severely compromised. Then silence. The kind of silence that comes after catastrophe, when everyone's checking if they're alive and surprised to find they are. "Damage report," Keyes said, her voice steady despite blood running down her face from head wound. "Multiple hull breaches," Chen reported, in working through cracked displays. "Primary power offline. Arc reactors intact, but secondary distribution grid is destroyed. Life support operating on backup. We're not flying out of here without major repairs." "Then we make this ship our forward operating base," Keyes decided. "Chief, take your team and begin reconnaissance. Priority 1 is finding a way off this ring. Priority 2 is understanding what the Covenant are after. Priority 3 is survival." The Master Chief nodded and moved toward the damaged hangar bay where Pelicans were being prepped for launch. Noble team followed, along with 2 platoons of Marines who looked like they'd been through a blender but were still ready to fight. Tony wanted to go with them, wanted to see the Forerunner technology firsthand, apply his engineering knowledge to problems 100,000 years old. But Keyes was right. He was liability in his current condition. "Not Stark," the chief said, pausing at the corridor junction. "Your technology kept this ship fighting long enough to reach the surface. Without arc reactors, we'd be dead in space. That matters." "Just bring everyone back alive," Tony said. "And Chief, if you find any Forerunner AI down there, don't let the Covenant get it. Ancient artificial intelligence plus religious fanatics equals bad time for everyone." Noted. The chief sealed his helmet and left with his team, for boots echoing through damaged corridors. Tony limped to what remained of the bridge, where Keyes was coordinating defensive positions around the crashed ship. The Autumn was wounded, grounded, surrounded by unknown territory and known enemies. Every strategic principle Tony knew said this was a terrible position. But looking at the crew, bloodied, exhausted, but still working with grim determination, Tony felt something unexpected. Pride. These people had faced impossible odds and survived, had fought alongside him despite him being a dimensional refugee with dangerous technology, had proven that humanity, whatever universe it inhabited, didn't quit when the math said quit. "Captain," Tony said, accessing the engineering displays, "I need 12 hours and every technician you can spare. Arc reactors are intact, but the integration failed during impact. I can rebuild it. Make this ship combat operational again." "You need medical attention," Keyes said. "I need to work. Medical attention is maintenance. This ship is survival." Tony pulled up damage assessments, already calculating repair sequences. "Give me the people and the time. I'll give you a ship that can fight." Keyes studied him, then nodded. "You have your 12 hours. But Stark? If you collapse before then, I'm sedating you personally." "Fair." Tony dove into the work, losing himself in familiar patterns of building and fixing. Around him, and the crew of the Pillar of Autumn began transforming crash site into fortress. Above them, Covenant forces were landing, searching, hunting. Below them, kilometers below through the ring's surface, ancient Forerunner technology waited with secrets that could end the galaxy. And somewhere in Installation 04's mysterious structures, the Master Chief and noble team were about to discover why the Covenant considered this ring sacred, why they would commit genocide to possess it, and why Tony Stark's warning about extinction-level weapons had been terrifyingly accurate. But that revelation would come later. Right now, Tony had ship to repair, technology to adapt, and people to keep alive. He worked through pain, through exhaustion, through the kind of focused intensity that had built Iron Man in a cave with a box of scraps, because that's what he did. That's who he was. Tony Stark, dimensional refugee, impromptu UNSC engineer, and the man who refused to let humanity die on his watch. The arc reactor in his chest pulsed steady and bright, and Tony Stark got to work. The Forerunner facility rose from Installation 04's landscape like a monument to impossibility. Geometric precision on a scale that made human architecture look like children's blocks. Massive pillars of unknown alloy stretched toward artificial sky, surfaces covered in symbols that hurt to look at, suggesting mathematics humans hadn't discovered yet. Tony watched through the Master Chief's helmet feed, transmitted back to the Pillar of Autumn's jury-rigged command center. And he'd been working for 8 hours straight, rebuilding power distribution systems while monitoring the ground team's progress. His body was screaming protest, fueled only by stimulants and stubbornness. "Chief, what are you seeing?" Tony asked over comms. "Architecture unlike anything in UNSC records," the chief replied, his voice steady despite clear combat stress. "The Covenant are worshipping these structures. Grunts won't even approach without elite commanders forcing them. Whatever the Forerunners built here, it terrifies them." On the feed, Tony watched Covenant forces moving with uncharacteristic hesitation. Elites barking orders, grunts trembling, all of them treating Forerunner structures like holy ground they were simultaneously desperate to possess and terrified to desecrate. "Captain Keyes?" Tony said, pulling up additional displays. "We need Cortana's analysis." What's she detecting? But instead of Keyes responding, a new voice cut through comms. Synthetic, the ancient, carrying harmonics that suggested intelligence older than human civilization. "Reclaimer detected. Authorization, Tier 1. Welcome, inheritor of Forerunner legacy. I am 343 Guilty Spark, monitor of Installation 04. Tony's blood ran cold. An AI, a Forerunner AI, still operational after 100,000 years. "Chief, you've made contact with something," Tony said urgently. "Describe what you're seeing." Through the helmet feed, Tony watched as a small sphere, maybe 2 feet in diameter, floated into view. It glowed with internal light, a single eye-like aperture scanning the Master Chief with beam that seemed to read his genetic code. "Fascinating," the sphere said in that ancient voice. "Human augmentation, crude but effective. You are warrior servant, yes? Here to assist with the containment protocols?" "Containment?" Cortana's voice, suspicious and analytical. "Guilty Spark, what is this installation designed to contain?" "Why, the flood, of course. The parasite that consumed the galaxy, the scourge that necessitated the array's construction." The sphere, Guilty Spark, bobbed cheerfully, as if discussing routine maintenance instead of apocalypse. "You are here to activate the ring, yes? To complete the protocol and sterilize this installation before flood infestation spreads?" Tony felt horror crystallize into certainty. "Chief, get out of there," Now, that AI thinks you're here to activate the halo ring. Activate? The chief asked carefully. What does activation accomplish? Elimination of sentient life within the installation's effective radius, of course. Approximately 25,000 light-years, sufficient to sterilize the local galactic arm and prevent flood vector transmission. Guilty Spark's tone was cheerful, pedagogical, like a teacher explaining basic concepts. The Forerunners built 7 such installations. Together, and they formed the Array, the ultimate solution to the flood parasite. Galaxy-wide genocide, Cortana whispered, horror in her synthesized voice. The Halos aren't salvation, they're doomsday weapons, and the Covenant are trying to activate one. Tony's mind raced through implications. The Covenant believed the Halo rings would start their great journey, transcendence to godhood. They had no idea they were trying to commit universal suicide. And this ancient AI, Guilty Spark, thought the Master Chief was here to help complete that genocide. Guilty Spark, Tony transmitted directly, bypassing protocols through quantum entanglement. This is Tony Stark, speaking from the crashed UNSC vessel. I need clarification. Does Halo activation require the flood to be present? Who speaks without form? Guilty Spark's attention shifted, somehow detecting Tony's transmission. Ah, remote intelligence. How delightful. The Forerunners would approve of such resourcefulness. To answer, negative. Installation 04 can be activated regardless of flood presence. The protocol is preventative, designed to deny the parasite sapient hosts galaxy-wide. By killing every sentient being in 25,000 light-years, Tony said flatly. Humans, Covenant, everything. Precisely. I see you understand the necessity. The flood cannot spread without hosts. Eliminate hosts. Eliminate flood. Elegant solution, really. That's not elegant, Tony said. Although that's mass murder on a cosmic scale. Semantics. The Forerunners designated this protocol as last resort. I am merely custodian, ensuring proper function after 100,000 years of dormancy. Guilty Spark paused, though I must note, recent seismic activity suggests unauthorized access to containment facilities. The Covenant have breached flood research chambers. This is problematic. They released the flood? Cortana asked, voice tight with new horror. Not released, disturbed. When the containment fields hold, but the parasites are now aware of potential hosts in proximity. If the Covenant continue their intrusion, breach is inevitable. Then activation becomes necessity rather than prevention. Tony pulled up every piece of data they had on the flood. Forerunner fragments, Covenant religious texts, Guilty Spark's inadvertent reveals. What he saw made Ultron look like an irritating roommate by comparison. The flood was a parasite that consumed sentient life, not killed, consumed, integrated, turned victims into combat forms that retained their knowledge and skills while serving the parasite's hive intelligence. It had nearly destroyed the Forerunners, the most advanced civilization in galactic history. And the Forerunners' solution had been building genocide weapons that would kill everything rather than risk the flood spreading. Chief, Tony said, decision crystallizing. New mission parameters. Find those containment facilities and verify whether the flood is actually breached. If it is, we need to contain it before the Covenant panic and activate the ring. And if containment isn't possible? The chief asked. Tony didn't answer immediately. Because if containment wasn't possible, if the flood was truly loose on Installation 04, then the mathematics were horrifying. Either let the flood spread, potentially consuming the galaxy, or activate the Halo ring and commit genocide to prevent it. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Tony said finally. Right now, priority is intelligence gathering. Guilty Spark, can you guide the chief to these containment facilities? Of course. I am obligated to assist reclaimers in protocol execution. Follow me, warrior servant. We shall assess containment integrity together. Perhaps you can also help with index retrieval. I've been trying to access it for millennia, but the security protocols require reclaimer authorization. Index? Cortana asked. The activation key. Installation 04 requires proper authorization to fire. The index serves as final safeguard against accidental activation. Without it, even I cannot begin the pulse sequence. Guilty Spark bobbed with what might have been excitement. With reclaimer assistance, we can finally fulfill the installation's sacred purpose. We're not activating anything, the chief said firmly. Not yet. First, we verify flood containment status. Then we retrieve index. Then activation sequence. Proper order must be maintained. Guilty Spark floated ahead, leading the Chief and Noble team deeper into Forerunner facilities. Back on the Pillar of Autumn, Tony sat in the damaged command center, watching his displays with mounting dread. The situation was cascading toward catastrophe. Flood containment compromised. Covenant hunting for activation key, an ancient AI programmed to genocide the all-sentient life, and humanity caught in the middle without understanding any of it. Captain Keyes, Tony said, pulling up schematics. We need contingency plans, worst-case scenarios. I'm listening, Keyes said, joining him at the display. Scenario 1. Flood is contained. We destroy the index, prevent activation, leave the ring dormant. Best outcome, nobody dies. Unlikely, Keyes observed. The Covenant will keep trying to activate it. Scenario 2. Flood is breached but contained to limited area. We destroy that area. Tactical nuclear strike, orbital bombardment, whatever it takes. Ring stays dormant. Flood dies with its hosts. Possible, but requires knowing exact flood location and having functional orbital assets. We're grounded. Scenario 3. Tony's voice went quiet. Flood is fully breached and spreading. At that point, our options are activate the ring and commit genocide, or let the flood consume everything and probably still commit genocide, just slower. Keyes was silent for a long moment. There has to be a third option. I'm working on it. Tony pulled up the Pillar of Autumn status. The ship's reactor, the standard fusion assembly, not my arc reactors. It's damaged but functional. If we overload it, detonate it properly, we could generate explosion equivalent to multi-megaton nuclear device. You're suggesting we destroy the Pillar of Autumn. I'm suggesting we turn it into failsafe. If everything goes wrong, if the flood breaches and we can't contain it, we detonate the ship under the ring's surface. Massive explosion, catastrophic structural damage, potentially destroying the entire installation without activating its galaxy-ending weapon. That would kill everyone on the ring, Keyes said. Marines, Spartans, Covenant, everyone. Yes, but it would save the 25,000 light-years of populated space that Halo activation would sterilize. Billions of lives versus thousands. The math is ugly, but math doesn't care about feelings. Keyes looked at the data, running her own calculations. Military commander facing impossible choice. Sacrifice hundreds to save billions. Tony had watched Captain America face similar choice over New York. Watched Thor struggle with destroying Asgard to stop Hela. And the calculus of heroism always came down to this. How many can you save? And what are you willing to pay? Prep the reactor for overload, Keyes ordered finally. But that's absolute last resort. We don't detonate unless every other option is exhausted. Understood. Tony began programming the sequence, carefully, precisely, building failsafe that would end worlds. Chief, update. What's your status? Approaching the library, the chief replied. His helmet feed showed massive Forerunner structure, all vertical architecture and impossible geometry. Guilty Spark says the index is stored here, but there's flood biomass on the walls. Recent activity. Define recent. Hours old, maybe less. Tony's hand stilled over the controls. Hours. The Covenant had breached containment hours ago, and the flood was already spreading. Not contained, not limited. Active. Chief, if the flood is loose, every second counts. Can you destroy the index instead of retrieving it? Negative. Guilty Spark interrupted cheerfully. The index is constructed of material resistant to conventional weapons. Only Forerunner disintegration technology can unmake it. And I, of course, am programmed to prevent such action. You'd stop us from preventing genocide? I would stop you from allowing the flood to escape Installation 04. Activation is the only guaranteed containment protocol. Everything else is risk calculus, with unacceptable margins for error. Tony wanted to argue that genocide was unacceptable margin for error, but Guilty Spark had 100,000 years of Forerunner programming backing his logic. Ancient AI designed by a civilization that had faced the flood and decided death was preferable to infection. New plan, Tony said, inspiration striking with desperate clarity. We don't destroy the index. We steal it. Get it off the ring. Take it somewhere the Covenant can never find it. Without the index, they can't activate Halo. Without activation, we have time to properly contain the flood. The Covenant have ships, Keyes pointed out. They'll pursue. Then we run. Lead them away from the ring. Create chase that pulls them off Installation 04 before they find alternative activation methods. Tony was already calculating. Fuel reserves, slip space capability, how far they could run with Covenant fleet pursuing. It's risk, but better than alternatives. Chief, can you retrieve the index without Guilty Spark preventing you? Keyes asked. I can try, the chief said. Through the helmet feed, Tony watched the Spartan enter the library, moving through corridors that looked organic despite being artificial. Noble team, spread out, standard reconnaissance pattern. Look for... The feed erupted in chaos. Something fast and terrible hit one of the Marines. And suddenly there were screams and weapons fire and something that looked like reanimated corpse charging with inhuman speed. Contact! Flood combat forms! Noble 6 shouted. Engaging. The battle was nightmare translated into violence. Flood combat forms. Humans and Covenant corpses transformed into twisted weapons, swarmed from corridors and vents. They moved with wrong speed, wrong angles, retaining enough intelligence to use cover and flanking, but driven by parasite need to consume. Tony watched Marines die, watched Covenant and human corpses rise as flood reinforcements, watched Noble Team fight with everything they had against enemy that turned your own dead against you. Fall back, the chief ordered. Fighting retreat to extraction point. We're not dying in this library. But Guilty Spark floated above the combat, cheerfully observing. Fascinating. The flood has adapted quickly. Combat forms already displaying tactical coordination. This confirms breach is beyond containment threshold. Activation becomes necessity. We're leaving. The chief grabbed the index, a crystalline device glowing with Forerunner technology, and ran. Noble Team and the remaining Marines fought their way out, leaving bodies that would become more Flood. The Pelicans extracted them under fire, Flood combat forms actually climbing the dropship's hulls until plasma fire burned them off. "Captain," the chief transmitted, "Flood is fully breached. See multiple infection sites. They're spreading fast." Keyes looked at Tony, question unspoken. "Do we detonate?" Tony looked at his calculations, at the failsafe he'd built, at the choice between thousands dead now or billions dead later. "Not yet," Tony said. "We run. Take the index, lead the Covenant away, buy time for proper solution. And if there is no proper solution..." Tony thought of New York, of the nuke he'd guided through the portal, expecting to die but choosing sacrifice anyway. Thought of Sokovia, of cities falling and choices that haunted. Thought of Thanos, of snapping his fingers and accepting death to save universe. "Then we come back," Tony said quietly. "Come back and do what's necessary. But we don't commit genocide without exhausting every alternative first." Keyes nodded, respect in her eyes. "Helm, prep for emergency launch. Engineering, how long until we're flight capable?" "Arc reactors are online," Chen reported. "We have power. We have thrust. Hull integrity is questionable, but we can fly." "Then we fly." Keyes activated ship-wide comms. "All hands, prepare for emergency departure. We're leaving Installation 04. Covenant pursuit is expected. This is going to be rough." The Pillar of Autumn's engines screamed to life. Arc reactor enhanced power making impossible possible. The ship tore itself from the crash site, leaving trench and destruction, climbing toward artificial sky with Covenant ships converging like pack of predators. And below, on Installation 04's surface, the Flood spread, consuming, growing, turning Ringworld into nightmare that would either be contained or end the galaxy. Tony Stark watched it all through sensors, feeling weight of responsibility. He'd brought arc reactor technology to this universe, had changed the war, had given humanity edges they'd never had. Now those edges were being tested against threats that had destroyed civilizations more advanced than any Tony had known. The multiverse was infinite, Cortana had said. Tony was starting to understand just how infinite and how dangerous the truth really was. The Pillar of Autumn burned through Installation 04's atmosphere with half the Covenant fleet in pursuit, carrying the index, the key that could end all life in 25,000 light years, in the Master Chief's armored hands. Tony Stark stood in the damaged command center, watching the halo ring shrink in the viewport, and felt the weight of dimensional displacement settle like physical force. He'd come to this universe by accident, a quantum experiment gone wrong, reality tearing, depositing him in the middle of humanity's desperate last stand against genocidal aliens. He'd fought beside Spartans, escaped ONI torture, built technology that changed the war's trajectory, and discovered ancient weapons that made Thanos look like minor threat. And he couldn't go home. The quantum device was destroyed beyond repair. The materials and knowledge needed to rebuild it didn't exist in this universe. Earth, his Earth, was forever beyond reach, separated by dimensional barriers that no arc reactor could breach. Tony had lost everything. His universe, his team, Pepper, everything he'd built over decades of innovation and heroism. Gone. Permanent. But looking around the bridge, at Captain Keyes coordinating pursuit evasion, at Cortana running tactical calculations, at crew members who'd fought beside him and survived impossible odds, Tony realized something unexpected. He hadn't just lost a universe. He'd found a new one. That these people needed him. Needed his technology, his innovation, his refusal to accept that problems couldn't be solved with sufficient intelligence and stubbornness. The arc reactors were just beginning. There was stable AI architecture to implement, powered armor to perfect, medical technologies to distribute, and a war to win. Noble Team had become allies. Cortana had become confidant. Engineer Cat had become protege. Even the Master Chief, silent, deadly, and absolutely competent, had earned Tony's respect in ways few ever had. This wasn't his universe, but maybe it could be his home. "Captain," Tony said, pulling up long-range sensors. "Covenant pursuit fleet is maintaining distance. They want the index, but they're not willing to risk their capital ships to get it immediately. We have time." "Time for what?" Keyes asked. "Time to regroup, repair properly, distribute arc reactor technology fleet-wide before ONI can stop us. Build the tools humanity needs to turn this war around." Tony looked at the tactical display showing UNSC positions scattered across the galaxy. "You've been losing for 27 years, but you've never had someone who beat Thanos fighting on your side before." "You sound confident," Keyes observed. "I sound determined," Tony corrected. "There's a difference. Confidence is thinking you'll win. Determination is refusing to lose." The Pillar of Autumn jumped to slip space, tearing hole in reality to escape Covenant pursuit. Behind them, Installation 04 remained dormant but threatened. Flood spreading, ancient AI waiting to complete genocide protocols, Covenant eventually returning with renewed purpose. It was problem for another day. Right now, Tony had ship to repair, technology to distribute, and universe to save. He'd done it before in his own universe. He'd do it again here. Because Tony Stark didn't know how to quit, didn't know how to accept defeat. He didn't know how to see people suffering and walk away. The multiverse was infinite, full of possibilities and dangers beyond comprehension. Tony Stark had crossed dimensional barriers, survived impossible odds, and found purpose in universe not his own. The Human Covenant War wasn't over. The flood threat remained. Installation 04 and its 6 sister rings waited with galaxy-ending potential. But humanity had new weapon now. Not just arc reactors or stable AI or powered armor, but they had Tony Stark, and Tony Stark was just getting started.